Good evening. We're going to get started here tonight. So, good evening. Thanks, everybody, for being here. So, this Board of Education meeting for February 7th, 2023 is called to order. Before we begin, can we please give a round of applause to the Harriet Tubman Middle School African Dance Class? Fantastic. So many of us were enjoying that performance before the meeting, and we're going to have an opportunity to enjoy one more dance piece in just a couple of minutes. Some items to get out of the way. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on has been posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tab. This meeting today is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28. It'll be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks, and you can find replay times on the district website. So, good evening. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Just a few reminders as we get started tonight. We do ask that everyone attending the meeting tonight, members of the public, staff, board members, that we treat each other with respect. We're excited that you've taken time out of your day to get involved in our school district, whether it's to testify or just to observe the proceedings. I strongly believe that our ability to engage with one another civilly is what makes our community strong. If you do wish to display signs or banners, please remain in the auditorium foyer behind the seating area and just try not to block any other attendees' views of the proceedings. And for safety reasons, we'll also need to keep the walkways and aisles clear. I appreciate those on the sides, which you already are doing, standing against the wall. Thank you very much for that. And in general, we would appreciate if everyone can just be mindful of others in the room and remember that we're setting an example tonight for our community's children. With that, Superintendent, would you like to introduce our guests for this evening?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, directors. It's always great to start off the evening with some drumming and dancing, and we're going to have a chance to hear one more short performance, and we'll try to get some chairs out afterwards. But we're so excited to have here tonight students from the Harriet Tubman Middle School African Dance Class. They're here with their teacher, Sekou Walker. Sekou's been teaching West African dance and PPS since 2008 and has studied West African dance since 1998. I'd love to ask him to come up to the mic and tell us just a little bit more about this student performance group and what they're performing for us here this evening. Sekou?
Hey, thank you guys. Thank you guys for having us. Like you said, we are performers and dancers from Harriet Tubman Middle School. I also work at Fabian, so I have wonderful students like all over the city. This piece you're going to see tonight is called Korde Juga. Korde Juga is the cast of the jester or the clown, the comedian, okay? And this is from Malian and Guinea, okay, countries. And the Manding people are the ones who do this dance, okay? And the purpose of the Korde Juga is to show up and interrupt a party or a fun festivity or whatever, but it's very calculated. They're very brilliant with it. They travel with an ensemble. The music is amazing. They're amazing. They're very acrobatic and just quirky and weird, but it all like comes together at the same time. So we've been preparing this piece since we started back in August, and this is like what it's turned into. It's not finished yet, okay? We still have some other things to incorporate with it. We have a recital coming up in March, so we're still building on it, but the students really love this piece. They love that the music timing is interesting. It's in like 3 and 6. They love the whole concept of being able to play around and be playful. If you guys come see us in March, you're gonna see them with like full-on costumes and face paint and things like that. So they're really excited to just kind of adapt that clown character and everything. And I have my, amazing brothers and nephew here drumming with us and everything. And so what we want you guys to take from this is just to see how important the arts are. I always say that when I'm talking about the arts, how important it is. And how much the students love it and how hard they work, okay? So check us out and hope you enjoy it. All right.
Well, directors, I think as we all just witnessed, the visual and performing arts are thriving here at PPS. Thank you, Sekou Walker, and our Tubman dancers. One more last applause. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that was exhausting to watch. So that was incredible. It's really incredible. So thank you. All right, that's a hard act to follow. We're going to move into still important stuff. Thank you again. So next, we're going to be voting on a resolution to honor National School Counseling Week, which happens to be this week. Superintendent Guerrero.
Well, our school counselors, we understand they're a critical element in creating a supportive school community as well as a positive educational experience. Our school counselors, they act as advocates, mediators, consultants, supporters, observers, navigators. They lean on their expertise to help and support our students handle the pressures of school and daily life. Our counselors' work goes beyond helping students develop the skills to achieve academic and professional success. I'd like to ask our Chief of Student Support Services, Jay Buno, and our Program Administrator for School Counseling, Marquita Guzman, here to share just a few more details about the very many positive contributions that our counselors play here at Portland Public Schools.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me a few moments to speak with you all. Thank you for allowing me to speak to the contributions of our school counselors in help making all of our students develop skills they need to access their education and thrive in school and beyond. National School Counseling Week is an opportunity for us to shine a light on the significant impact school counselors have in increasing student achievement. This year's theme of school counselors helping students dream big really, I think, encapsulates so much of what our schools counselors do to foster growth and exploration with our students. We have over 189 school counselors across our school district, really working to support the academic, social, emotional, and career and college readiness of all of our students. As part of our comprehensive school counseling programming, counselors deliver curriculum across 3 distinct areas outlined by the American School Counselor Association: academic, personal, social, and career and college readiness. PPS counselors also decided to add a 4th domain focused on racial equity and social justice. Can we go to the next slide? So many of the character traits we aim to develop through the PPS portrait, such as inclusive, collaborative problem solvers, transformative racial equity leaders, resilient and adaptive learners, and positive, confident, and connected to self, are really skills we are building in our students each and every day through classroom lessons, small group work, and individual support we provide to students and families. Through our core counseling curriculum, students gain skills in emotional management, healthy relationships, bullying prevention, conflict resolution, and self-awareness and self-esteem. In the academic domain, counselors are focusing on developing executive functioning skills with students, study skills, and academic planning. We've started to really expand career and college readiness lessons for even at our youngest grades in kindergarten and K-5 to focus on career cluster education so students start thinking and dreaming about the world of work and careers. We also do interest in strength assessments and post-secondary planning, of course, with all of our students. In addition to delivering Tier 1 lessons each year, counselors through comprehensive school counseling plans develop data-informed goals which are tied to improving student achievement outcomes. This year, we asked all of our counselors to develop a counseling program goal in support of our board goals. I want to thank the school board and district leadership for their wise decision to increase school counselors through the investment of SIA dollars in school counselor FTE. That really made a big difference in many of our schools with targeted supports for students. I wanted to appreciate the board and district leadership for the continued focus on lowering student counselor and student ratios. Multiple research studies directly link student to school counselor ratios to better graduation rates, higher attendance rates, and lower disciplinary incidents across our schools. Our high school counselors engage in individual academic planning with each and every student on their caseload and are key contributors to supporting on-track graduation for our students. Our continued improvements in graduation rates in our district are directly related to the support of our high school counselors. In closing, thank you for your time, attention, and continued support as we celebrate all of our school counselors across the district. Thanks.
Hire more counselors, not cops in schools.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6646?
Second.
Director Brim Edwards moves, Director Green seconds. Any board discussion?
I just want to say, so I went to school with Miss Marquita. I think we graduated about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? Right. But I mean, when I seen her at the school last year when we was having some issues with our middle schools, when I just come to seeing her that we could not have a better advocate for our kids than her, and so it is great to see you here, and thank you for everything you're doing.
I just want to join Director Hollins in the thank you to all the counselors in the schools. As a parent, you don't truly appreciate the counselors until you need one, and then you realize how indispensable they are for our students and our families. So thanks to all the counselors, and also to the taxpayers for giving us the resources that we can make sure that we have the counseling support in our schools, because without that additional funds, we wouldn't be able to do it. So thanks, everybody.
And certainly as a senior this year, my counselor has been a lot of help in the college process. And I think I'm probably the only one at this table right now that can say my school counselor is really, really important to me. And Mr. Yoder, if you're listening, thank you for being an advocate for me as a student. And just to all the counselors who do so much, and especially with the increase in student safety issues and gun violence, especially at Cleveland, counselors mean more than anything, especially right now. So thank you to all of you that do it. I know it's a lot of hard work and emotional labor, so thank you.
I want to jump in and say thank you also to all of the counselors, particularly Ms. Henry, who I don't know through my own experience, but I bet I might be the only one here that can find my way to the counseling office with my eyes closed at Benson High School. And that's because I was in her office quite often during my son's senior year. Really appreciate the work that you do. And we know how vital it is, particularly now, for your presence in our schools. Thanks.
Great. And I'll just add, before I move on, my mom was a school teacher most of her life, but in the last decade or so, she got her master's in counseling and became a school counselor in the Sandy and Borean School District. So I'm really excited to vote on this resolution, and thanks, Mom, for everything you did. She's long retired, but counselors are vital to what we do. So,
Well, hold on. Since we're giving out kudos to counselors and stuff, my counselor back at Benson, Mr. McKenzie, was awesome. So I just want to put that out there since we're talking about our counselors. No.
That's great. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
Okay, so the board will now vote on Resolution 6646 to recognize February 6th through 10th, 2023 as National School Counseling Week. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? And Representative McMahon?
Yes.
Resolution 6646 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative McMahon voting yes. Great, thank you. All right, another important proclamation for tonight is a proclamation recognizing February as Black History Month. Superintendent.
Yes, in addition to celebrating our counselors, it is also Black History Month, which represents an important opportunity for all of us to celebrate Black Americans' achievements and recognize their central role in U.S. history, which I know is a bit of national debate at the moment, but we believe our students deserve to have their heritage and background celebrated as part of their educational experience. We believe it's important for our students to be able to see themselves as well as their history and background and what they learn in school. I've asked our Deputy Superintendent of Instruction and School Communities, Dr. Cheryl Proctor, to share with you some of the activities and resources provided to our schools to support their learning during Black History Month and throughout the year. And if you didn't catch it, she did a great little video clip the other day. You got to catch it. Dr. Proctor, and it looks like Dr. Adams joining.
Yes, she asked me to join.
Yes, she's joining.
Thank you so much, Superintendent and directors. Great to be with you this evening. So yes, we have provided a wealth of resources and information to our schools regarding lessons and information that can be shared during Black History Month. In a time when so many things pull us apart, Black History Month is a true reminder that there are so many journeys we all share. It's not just Black history, it's the world's history. Only through the realization of the contributions of so many people across the African diaspora can we truly appreciate the journey of the African American people. Black History Month is a celebration of not only accomplishments, but the survival of so many amazing struggles. As a matter of fact, Black history is a true testament of love. Why do I say love? It's because of the love of our ancestors, coupled with their belief that tomorrow can be better for their children, that they persevered. Many of them knew they would not see the freedoms they fought for in their lifetime, but dreamed of a day when their children would be free. It is that love which was the foundation of their survival, and those children have gone on to accomplish so many amazing things in our history, from Grammy-winning musicians to astrophysicists, from marching for freedom to President of the United States, and so many more journeys in between. And so I'm going to invite my colleague and my friend, Dr. Renard Adams, to share a few words.
Dr. Proctor asked me to spoil my Black History Month video clip that's coming up in a couple weeks. Black History Month is personal, very personal to me, and so I'm going to keep it personal, local, and immediate. I was raised by my great-grandmother, who only had the benefit of a third-grade education because she was born in 1914 in the deeply segregated South. But she instilled in me the value of education and always talked about the ancestors, the beauty, the brutality, the truth of it, the brilliance, the magnificence. And I have come to know that this proclamation at this time and in this moment is critically important. As the superintendent mentioned, we have forces at play that would attempt to erase the history of African Americans in our country. And there is no America without African Americans. This country was built on their labor and their accomplishments. And so I just want to thank the board for once again proclaiming the importance of this month and allowing us to have an administration that pushes and promotes the history of all peoples, including African Americans. So thank you.
Thank you both for your leadership and your humanity.
Thank you. Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
Director Green makes the motion, and Director Holland seconds. Our proclamation and recognition of February's Black History Month. Is there any board discussion?
So I was thinking about this a while back. Well, not a while back, a couple of weeks ago. So me and my daughter was trying to see how far removed we were from slavery, right? And we looked at it was like 1965 is when the official slavery so-called ended. And in that conversation, it was interesting because it was like, we're really not that far removed. So my dad was born in 1916. His mother and grandmother, his grandmother was an actual slave, and we were calling back to, folks in the family to try to figure out how far back we can find. And so when we came to realization, we were only literally 3 generations removed from this. And, the accomplishments that we have made from then to now is remarkable. It's miraculous, the type of stuff we've done. And we wanted to make sure, we want to make sure that we understand where we're coming from, how far we've came, but also understand how far we need to go. And that was something that was sobering for me when I was having that conversation. We walk around Portland, and we've had these conversations as well. We see, a lot of people have Black Lives Matter stuff in their homes and their windows and all this stuff. And we really want to make sure that, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, that's coming from the history and the ancestors that came before us, the ones that my grandmother, who have prayed for 7 generations. Well, we're only 3 generations in, right? And so, you know, Black Lives Matter is what we live, not just something that we display. So I just want to thank you guys for that and just put that out there. Thank you.
I want to also say I had the benefit last week of attending for the second time, the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. And you start in the basement and you start to look at the history of the slave trade and how it moves through Europe and throughout the Americas. And it was very impactful, to say the least. If you haven't been, I hope you have a chance to go. It's a Smithsonian institution, so you can't get through it in one day. I also, for the first time, had a chance to visit the top floors, and that was very uplifting and showing the accomplishments and the greatness and the music and the entertainment and the athletics, and what an uplifting experience it was to experience that with community members and friends. May we never forget.
Well, since we all talking, whenever we get to Black History Month, I always think about my youngest daughter, Taylor, and an interaction that she had when she was a freshman in high school. And they came to Black History Month because we always talk about it, and they got to talking about, well, Taylor, tell us what you remember and what you know. And Taylor said, and I just happened to be there. Philippe was there. He was the principal at the time. Harish Dick, that's my guy, Mr. H. And they had another teacher. It was like they were like watching this teacher, and they were like, "So tell us what you think." And Taylor said, "I'm not interested." And the teacher was pressing. It's like, "No, seriously, go to somebody else. I'm not." Taylor's the baby, so she's a hothead to say the least. And she's like, "I'm not interested." And then the teacher asked, "Well, tell me why." And Taylor says, "Well," and I'm sitting there, I had a proud dad moment, because she said, "Every year we talk about Black people and Black History Month, and we talk about slavery and this, but I didn't come from slavery. I came from kings and queens. And if y'all aren't going to talk about anything beyond slavery, then y'all need to talk to somebody else." And this is what she said to this little teacher. And I'm sitting there for a moment, and I'm like, first I'm thinking, come on, baby, don't be rude. But at the same time, I'm super proud, because I'm like, tell them what you know, baby. Tell them what you know. And I always think about that, because it's a reminder that I understand our history and our lineage, and slavery is a part of it. But we didn't come from slaves. We were kings, we were queens. We were philosophers. We were people that studied the stars. We were a whole bunch of other things that a European nation made slaves, but we weren't slaves. So when we start talking about Black History Month and the history of Black America, let's remember, it is what it is. I didn't come from slavery. Slavery is a part of my history, but I didn't come from slavery. I came from kings, and I came from queens, and I came from royalty, and I'm the best there is. And so I love that we here, but let's talk about the whole history, right? You know what I'm saying? So when we start educating our kids about, this is Black History Month, and do you know that, I know that we were sold on the blocks. I know that they, you know what I'm saying, they went with us and touched our genitals and, you know what I'm saying, treated us like livestock. Yes, I know that, but do you realize that these were kings that they were doing that to? That they were belittling and taking away the name of a people, that they were forcing a people to take somebody else's name, that this was mass genocide on a whole nother level. So let's not like placate, let's not sugarcoat it. Yes, slavery is a part of it, but that's not who I was. So stop telling my kids that's who I was. If you go tell my kids that's who I was, then tell my kids that's what you made us. But don't tell my kids that that's what we were. You know what I mean? And so I love Black History Month, and I want us to do a better job of telling the story when we start telling his story. You know what I mean? So that's my thought on Black History Month, and I love it, and it is what it is.
Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
So All I'm going to add is that I'm just really proud to serve on this board with some of my colleagues. So thank you there very much for those comments. The board will now vote on Resolution 6647, Proclamation and Recognition of February as Black History Month. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Are there any abstentions? Representative McMahon.
Yes.
Resolution 6647 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative McMahon voting yes. The board will now vote on the consent agenda. Board members, we all had an opportunity to remove items from the consent agenda. And at this point, I will ask Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
No.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda?
Motion.
Second?
Director Green moves, Director Constam seconds. Any board discussion? Director Edwards?
Two items. I didn't want them to be pulled, but I'd like to speak to the off-campus travel and also the MESD resolution. I'll start with the MESD resolution. In the past, it was a separate agenda item, but since it's part of the consent agenda, I want to just continue to raise the issue of health services offered to our students in those schools that don't have, those high school students that don't have health centers. That there is essentially no, while we have MESD nurses in 3 of our high schools, that's not at all the same as the services that are provided, that can be provided by the health centers. So Grant, Lincoln, and Ida B. Wells Barnett, we essentially don't have any health center on the west side, and then a big part of the northeast for Grant, and there are some critical services. And having had students on both sides of in a school that had a student health center and really made it a lot of services very accessible to students, and then also having a student who was in a school that only had access to the MESD nurse, the difference in what was accessible to students. So if you're at one of those schools without a health center, you essentially have to get on, a bus and go get those services. So I would hope that there's some opportunity, maybe it's during the budget process or some other time, to talk about the services that I really appreciate the answer I got to the question that I asked before the meeting. And some possible options relating to whether it's sports physicals, contraceptives, and telehealth options that at some point that gets explored for those students who don't have it accessible at the high school, because there's nothing like having it in the school available to students to make it something that they access versus, hey, hop on a bus in the middle of the school day and go visit it. So I appreciate the options that it sounds like the district staff sort of curated with or talked about with the MESD, and I hopefully will sports physicals and other things that not everybody has access to a private doctor to go get a sports physical. So I hope we really think about how we equitably provide services. And again, this isn't anything with the MESD, it's just a nurse, it's just they can't provide all those services, and this is like, I guess, the moment I can raise the issue.
Just to add a little clarification here, Director Brim Edwards, thank you for the advocacy there, just procedurally, so our community is clear. The member districts of the Multnomah Educational Service District at this time approve a local service plan, which is essentially blessing a menu of options. We'll come back to the board with, from that menu, what our recommendation is for services in the coming school year. And of course, we look forward to a conversation around how do we supplement those services so that all of our students have access to the kinds of services Director Brim Edwards was bringing up.
Yeah. And just before you move on, I just want to make sure that we are clear with the public who might be watching the reason why we don't have the health clinics in those other high schools. I can talk about that, or you can talk about that. I just want to make sure we understand that's not a district decision, it's a Multnomah County decision.
Yeah, and well, there's it's the county, and there's a whole range of ways in which those health centers are provided. I don't think I intended to say that was a district response. I just want to make sure to keep the focus on the students to make sure that in whatever form it is, that they have access to really critical services and they have it accessible at their school.
Yeah, I just want to make sure the public understands this board is certainly in favor of providing those, and if Multnomah County were willing to continue providing those services in those clinics in other high schools, I think we would have them there. They so far have not been willing, so.
Yeah, so I guess then since the county's not willing to do it, then figuring out ways, and I think there's been some options presented about ways to provide those services at the schools in which is probably 5,000 students that don't have access to some of those pretty essential services. So then the other issue I wanted just to speak to is the off-campus travel and the research residencies that we're going to be voting on. We've had a lot of mail about. And I'm going to be a yes and view them as really life-changing learning opportunities. And I also want to thank the school leaders and staff at the schools, not just for responding to the questions about the travel as we sort of recover from COVID and sort of get into a rhythm, but also there had been a complaint in 2018, not about the travel specifically, but about to make sure that there was continuity of instruction for the students who'd stayed. And I really appreciate the care and the thoughtfulness that's gone into thinking about when those concerns were raised, thinking about what about the majority of the students are still at the school. And so, like I say, I think there's been a plan presented. I have two outstanding concerns. In 2019, following the complaint that had been offered, there was a board resolution about convening a work group to look at how do we create a capstone experience for all middle school students. And I mean, as Director DePass just mentioned, I mean, it could come in a whole bunch of different forms. It could be a trip to Washington, D.C. to visit the museum, or it could be many different things. And so to think about how we create those equitable experiences. And I know that because of COVID, I think we're going to have and I'll let you answer, we're going to have a presentation on what came out of that, but really not losing sight of all of our students needing those formative experiences in middle grade, so it's not just some students having that. And then the second piece, and I guess this is just also like a budget forward thought, is that last year, I think in response to the some of the inequities of availability of fundraising and be able to afford travel at some of the high schools, that as part of the budget process created a travel and field trip equity fund, and the money was distributed to the high schools. And I hope as we head into maybe there'll be a convergence between the work group and thinking about what those middle grade capstone experiences for all our students. So the really cool, amazing trips that have been described to us in the hundreds of emails we've had, thank you everybody, that all students will have something that's meaningful to them, and they get that opportunity to experience that also in their middle grades. And so thinking about how we expand that travel and field trip equity fund to also hopefully support some of those middle grades experience too. I mean, just online, we have like a Roseway Heights student group trying to raise money just to go to Seattle. And I think about, like, you know, they may not go if they don't raise the money, and just what message we send if only some students get these incredible opportunities. So I hope that we can expand that. And I appreciate that the leaders of many of these programs that are here have also offered to be thought partners about how we can support it across the district, and I really appreciate that offer. The offer was, again, it was like right before COVID, so Hopefully, and I heard from somebody today, Sean from Oyanakai, thank you, that offered to continue to be helpful in that, how do we structure great experiences for our students.
Great, thank you. Any other board discussion? Ms. Bretsch, is any public comment on the consent agenda?
We do have public comment, and we have some students sign up in the student comment section that are speaking to the field trip resolution. You may call them during this time.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, we'll start with Jamil Manning.
Welcome. In a few minutes, when we get to the actual public comment, I'll do my spiel, but just know that you'll have about 3 minutes, and you'll have a green light, and then it'll turn red when the 3 minutes is up. And at that point, if you could just wrap up comments, that would be great. And thank you very much for being here tonight. So.
Thank you. I am a parent. This is my student, Boston. I just had a few things that I wanted to say. This is personal to me because I am an alumni of the Japanese immersion program. I went to Richmond Elementary and went to Mount Tabor. I went to Japan in 5th grade and in 8th grade with my class. And now my son is in the program. He was selected, so he's in 7th grade. I believe that I am the person I am today due to the community that I grew up in this program and the exposure that I was blessed to have, not once but twice. When the time came to consider schools for my son, him attending Richmond and being in the Japanese program was at the top of my list. COVID prevented him from going in 5th grade, but I feel like there's no reason that the students going forward should not be able to attend and have a chance to experience the life-changing trip that they'll never forget and utilize everything that they've learned so far. I feel like when I went, I was able to use the Japanese that I have learned and the skills and use it more than I would have used it here just in class every day. And we want the program to grow. Parents made the commitment as when their students were in kindergarten that they would take these classes and learn Japanese, learn the culture, and I just feel like they deserve to go and use what they've learned. That was part of the commitment that was made when we decided to put our children in these programs. A lot of families may have went elsewhere, went to a different district, had their child not been in this program, and we want it to grow. We don't want people to turn away from it and decide that it's not, a good fit for their family. That's about all that I have. I thank you for your time.
Thanks for being here.
Letha Tawny.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Letha Tawney, Tawney, and I'm the founding president of GeneRen, the parent organization supporting the Albina Mandarin Immersion Program at Dr. Martin Luther King Elementary, Harriet Tubman Middle School, and Jefferson High School. And we urge you to support Resolution 6642, approving in particular the Taiwan research residency for our 8th grade students. First, I'd really like to thank the board for supporting the Harriet Tubman and Dr. MLK Jr. communities over the last difficult year with the relocation questions, and as PPS wavered on continuing our program into Jefferson High School. The PPS board is fundamentally an accountability institution. So we come to you when PPS is failing the chronically underserved. But tonight, instead, We're lifting up a visionary dual language immersion department that's living up to the equity that PPS says it strives for. Recognizing that the elite DLI programs that were nationally recognized here at PPS were not equitably accessible, in 2014, PPS partnered with Ron Herndon at the Albina Head Start, which had been and continues to offer Mandarin to its preschoolers, to launch the Mandarin immersion at Dr. MLK. It was envisioned as a pre-K through college program. This is PPS at its best, with strong links to Albina Head Start and deep wraparound services from Jinren and SEI. 15% of our Mandarin scholars identify as Black, and we continue to build bridges and remove barriers so more families can imagine their children thriving in Mandarin DLI. You'll hear later from Kanye, who's one of those Albina Head Start alums, and that first kindergarten class from 2014 is ready to undertake their research residency this year, even as many come from families with no access to or experience with international travel. The research residency is directly linked to their core 8th grade academic work. Remember, our students meet their social sciences curriculum requirements in Mandarin, and so this is tied to that. They'll present their results in Mandarin and English when they return, and we invite all of you to their showcase. We support the Vietnamese DLI program at Rose City Park, establishing their research residency next year, and want to appreciate the established programs that have supported us as we've grown up. PPS DLI options have always been visionary, out ahead of the rest of the nation, higher quality, and more effective. Jinren has come alongside, supported families. Last week, we took families with their applications to go get their passports, to get those filings done, because they're not easy. And we've raised enough funds to provide full scholarships for half the class that's going in April. We ask you to continue partnering with us to make the best PPS has to offer fully available to those in our community who have so often been left behind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kanye Rhodes.
Thanks for being here.
Hello, my name is Kanye Rhodes, R-H-O-D-E-S. I am here today on behalf of the 8th grade Harriet Tubman Chinese Immersion Program. In our program, our class will be the first with an opportunity to travel to an environment where we can speak Mandarin. We want to go because we will get to practice and improve our Mandarin. We will be doing field studies, which are assignments that we will have to do while navigating around Taipei. We will also be practicing in a cultural exchange with our pen pals, staying at their house with the host family, and seeing our sister school. Going to Taipei is a big part of our capstone project, which is where we interview Taipei students and their families in Mandarin. When we get back, we will show our families our projects and the 7th graders so they have an understanding of what they have to do next year. This is important for many reasons. One of those is we have been in Mandarin immersion for 9 years, starting at MLK Elementary School and now ending in Tubman, or you can continue on at Jefferson High School. Passing this class is more than just an A or a high school credit. It's completing what we have been learning for most of our lives. We are also trying to break the stereotype that only privileged people can travel internationally, because everyone should get the opportunity to go to other places and learn new things. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that most people don't get to experience. In the future, we hope to pass on our knowledge to the next generation and the younger grades below us that will give them hope and inspiration that could inspire them to do the same. Next year, if they go and we don't have any experience teaching them, they will go in blindsided. If we go, we can help all the grades below us by passing what we learned from the trip to them. Please please allow us to fulfill what we have been learning for the past 9 years and complete what we have been working on and learning for. Help us get this chance to complete the journey and pass it on to the other students. Thank you.
Alex Spanman and Sora Postlethwaite.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Sora Postlethwaite, Postlewait.
I'm Alex Banman, Banman.
I'm in 8th grade at Mount Tabor Middle School. I've been studying in the Japanese dual language immersion program for almost 10 years. This immersion program experience has not only given me an opportunity to learn my Japanese heritage, but also share the education and culture with all my classmates. Our program is growing every year. Students transfer to our program from all over the world. One of the reasons is the education that we receive in school is more just studying for tests. It is an actual tool we can use and make us strong to be the next generation of leaders. We have an opportunity to use this tool during these travel experiences. The Japanese Research Residency is not just an international trip, it is a place we learned about extensively from our classroom. We also share a great part of our culture with Japanese students. My brother Sam went on this trip in 2017. He and his classmates still talk about what an amazing experience it was. He also learned about the awful war experience from survivors in Hiroshima. These powerful experiences will not be able to be learned from our textbooks. While we are researching our selected topics in Japan, we keep up other subjects that are missing from classrooms in Portland. These tremendous opportunities have been ongoing for over 20 years. Please keep us going. We are not just immersion program students, we are your future. Thank you for giving me this opportunity today, and please accept our request.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm a student in the Japanese Dual Language Immersion Program. Most of the kids in the Japanese program have been working on their Japanese for 9 to 10 years. We have put a lot of effort into learning Japanese so that we can go on these very important educational exchanges to Japan. I am someone who has gone to Japan to visit my Oba-chan, and just using Japanese every day has greatly improved my speaking ability. We have been working hard since school started so that we can make this academic exchange happen. So much planning has already been done, and it's so important to experience other cultures and learn about their customs and improve our speaking skills. Many of us are very excited to see students from our partner schools as well. We would get to speak with kids our age that live in another country and share our experiences as well. Please consider approving our request. Thank you.
Henix Farrar Van Allen.
Thanks for being here.
Konbanwa. My name is Honix Farrar Van Allen. Verarvanallen. I'm Honix, and I'm a student at Mount Tabor Middle School. I'm here today to talk about the Japanese Research Residency. I have firsthand experience with the benefits of visiting another country to learn the language. I was born in Mexico and visit my family there every single year. Even though I know Spanish words, without those trips, the true meaning would be lost to me. Nothing makes you feel fluent like being able to tell and understand jokes with your cousins. You can only learn so much in a classroom. My classmates and I have been looking forward to this opportunity because we know this could very well be the best hands-on learning experience we'll get throughout our entire education. We will be speaking Japanese 24/7. We will be dealing with money and money conversion, which is one of the best examples of math in the real world. And we'll be learning science and history in our field studies. My classmates and I have a long way to go before we can speak, read, write, and understand Japanese like a native. This became very apparent to me when I spoke to the mayor of Nantoshi. I get HPs in my classes, but listening to him banter with his colleagues showed me how far I still have to go. If the Japanese, Mandarin, and Vietnamese DLI programs are to continue effectively, we need this and all future research residency trips to be approved for all. If equity is an issue, then the solution is to provide those other students with similar opportunities, not to take this one from us. Whether that be using like a field trip to another state or even another country that would directly be of benefit to their learning, or if it's simply taking them outside of their classroom for a week and teaching them something that they can learn in the real world. I hope we can work together to make these valuable learning opportunities available to everybody. 聞いてくれてありがとうございました。
May Pence.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is May Pence, P-E-N-C-E. Konbanwa. My name is May Pence, and I'm an 8th grader at Mount Tabor Middle School. This evening, I have the privilege of being here tonight to talk about the 8th grade Japan research residency. My peers and I hope that you approve this trip tonight, and for many years to come. It is crucial for the JMP students and all other second language schools to have trips such as this one. This residency involves going to Japan for 2 weeks and studying Japanese culture and more specifically, their schools. When we were informed that we might not do this residency, after 20 plus years of JMP students going, we were devastated. Having studied the Japanese language for 9 plus years and missing the 5th grade residency due to COVID-19, it feels unjust to be denied the privilege of going on this residency. Moreover, the basic idea of this residency is to experience real, rich Japanese culture. As you know, a large part of the Japanese program is learning authentic Japanese culture. In my class, we have something that is called a fluent fool. That means that while you may speak the language with perfect pronunciation and you may be able to write every character and symbol, if you do not properly understand and engage in their culture, you would look like a fool if you visited the country. This is the exact reason why going to Japan and experiencing real Japanese culture is so important. It would be an eye-opening experience that would not only help us learn substantially better Japanese in our high school career, but would open doors for us later in life. When students are applying to colleges, universities, and jobs, it would be absolutely phenomenal to see that not only does that person speak another language, but they went to that country and proficiently communicated and got around using the skills that they learned during their 8th grade residency. During our residency, we will be touring various Japanese schools and shadowing kids in their classes. By doing this, we will learn what an average Japanese student does in their day. We will spend time presenting to these students, and in doing so, we will be spending time honing our Japanese speaking and writing skills. Once again, I compel you to improve this residency, the residencies for other language programs, and all residencies for years to come. Thank you.
Elise Coffey.
Welcome.
Hello. Okay. Let's see. Here we go. Hello, my name is Elise Coffey, C-O-F-F-E-Y. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm a senior at Grant High School, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the Japanese Dual Language Immersion Program's research residency trip to Japan. I strongly urge the board to keep the 8th grade trip as it is currently structured so students can fully benefit from this unique and valuable culture exchange. I have been a part of this program for the past 11 years, and I was able to participate in the research residency in 8th grade. This trip is the culmination of 8 years of intensive Japanese learning starting in elementary school. Although students invest hours in the classroom studying the language throughout their formative academic years, a deeper understanding of the culture and language can be found in the immersive travel experience. Simply talking with other students here in the US is not enough to develop a high level of proficiency in the language. The opportunity to travel to Japanese schools and converse with students and others is invaluable in developing a student's fluency. Additionally, staying with host families challenges students to converse in Japanese 24/7. This is why this trip cannot occur during our spring break in March. Schools in Japan do not start until April, so the time frame would not align for our students to attend Japanese schools, which is the most important aspect of this trip. The research residency not only develops a student's fluency, but also develops leadership and time management skills. Before traveling to Japan, students are each responsible for planning a specific part of their trip and sharing this information with their classmates. Additionally, students develop a research topic and conduct surveys and interviews with Japanese citizens while they are there. They then compare this with data collected from individuals in the US. A longer trip to Japan allows students to fully immerse themselves in the culture while also gathering the necessary information for the research projects they have tirelessly worked on all year. When visiting the Omiyage Banashi, the program-wide presentation of JDLI students' work, you can see firsthand the transformative effect this trip has had on JRR participants. I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to participate in the Japanese research residency. This trip deepened my love and understanding of Japanese culture. Not only did I advance my Japanese fluency, but I also became a more confident and determined individual upon returning. I'm currently co-president of the Japanese Student Council at Grant High School and was drawn to this leadership position after my travels to Japan. This trip and the program have also inspired me to continue my Japanese studies beyond high school. I strongly urge the board to keep the 8th grade trip as it currently is structured so students can fully benefit from this unique and valuable cultural exchange. I invite you to look at the poster board over to my left, which is an example of the research students conduct while in Japan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Bradshaw, is that the last public comment on the consent agenda?
We have one more on this topic. Sean Agusa.
Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, Julia. Thank you, everybody, for allowing us to come here tonight in force. I do want to. This whole evening has been somewhat surreal because the way you guys opened with the embracing of the African culture is huge. To showcase that in such a positive way and imbue it in the kids' education. That's kind of why we're all here tonight, to advocate for. And also to Letha and Jinren, so awesome to see that program start to sprout its wings because, like she alluded to, her program is modeled after the Japanese program that you guys all helped get started almost 30 years ago. And that's why we're here today. There's so much that I wanted to say, things around Groundhog Day, which is one of my favorite movies, but not really something I wanted to talk about tonight. But I've got an ask, and I have and then I've got a proposal. One of the things that we've heard consistently is around these amazing experiences and how wonderful it would be if these experiences or an experience was available to all kids. Allowing schools to be strategic can sometimes be hard. And there are times when we just don't know where to start. But I'll get to that in a minute because my first is an invitation. Elise just showed you it and other students have mentioned it, but we have an Omiyage Banashi, and I encourage you and staff to come and witness what these kids have done. They're putting boards together and collecting data in 2 languages and then amassing them together into a formative result. And to do that and to consider a common subject, with 2 different culture perspectives and then try and find what we have in common, think about, isn't that what we want our future to be like? We want to find what we have in common, not what we have, indifferent. Not indifferent, not what we have differently. But June 7th and June 8th, Sean.Igusa at oyanokai.org please email me, extend that to all of your administrative staff. We would love to be there, help curate, and show you and allow you to witness this amazing presentation. And I know that the Shuren and Jinren folks have that as well. And hopefully we will also be able to see the Vietnamese DLI showcase that next year. And then my last one is a proposal. I know that we have, I know that not every school has a capstone, but every school has unique qualities, characteristics, and communities. And what I would like to do is to propose, and Julia, thanks for bringing this up earlier, an initiative to help all PPS middle schools assess and evaluate what they have, what they could actually pull together and circle around on a potential 3-year track, which also helps with fundraising. If you have 3 years to plan, and also if you're doing this on a consistent basis, all of that stuff that seems so hard tactically can become, when looked at strategically, a little easier to swallow. And I know you guys have thoughts on that, but I am volunteering, offering the resources of Oinokai. I know that my colleagues at Shuren and possibly Jinren, I don't want to speak for you guys, would love to offer. I also know that I have the support of the teachers and the staff at Mount Tabor. And those are all resources that you guys can help bring to bear and help rise the tide, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the comment on this portion.
Great. Thank you. We'll have more comment in just a couple minutes. The board will now vote on the consent agenda, resolutions 6641 through 6645. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Representative McMahon.
Yes, and I just wanted to say that I come to a lot of these, as I'm sure you can all imagine. And is it rarely I get the privilege to see so many students who are so passionate about something that they do in their school community. And so I really appreciate all the students, especially who took the time to share with us your obvious passion for this program and for this trip. So thank you.
And are there any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative McMahon voting yes. Director Constant?
Thanks. I just wanted to take this moment to ask the superintendent if we can schedule a time for monitoring on our board goals, specifically around our middle school goals, and an update on middle school redesign, because so much of the benefits that you're all talking about and what Mr. Agusa just referred to here are articulated in our board goals for that 8th grade graduate portrait. And it's been a while since we checked back into that process, so we have language in there around capstone projects, around experiential learning, so I'd like to learn what's going on with that work a little more deeply.
Yeah, thank you, Director Constant. We're looking forward actually to coming back to this important topic. We have on the calendar March 7th, actually, for staff to come back and talk about the work around middle school redesign. I said, we got a little pause during COVID, but the work has been going on in earnest. And I think when we first talked about it, we were all unanimous in our support of building on the learnings of these important research residencies and making sure that all of our students had some kind of an experience or a capstone at the end of their middle school experience. So I think you'll hear the team talk about the overall middle grades experience becoming more project-based, more experiential, and giving each community the opportunity, as you just heard, and we will count on your support. Thank you. To building these kinds of unique experiences. And since I have the mic, the National Association of Bilingual Educators is being hosted their annual conference here in Portland in a couple weeks. I was invited to give the opening keynote, and my draft remarks talk about the strength of these language programs and these trips and the learning that I've had a chance to observe and see some of the classroom learning about, and it's something that has made PPS really much richer as far as the opportunities that it affords. We just want to make sure that over time we're expanding those experiences for all of our students.
Great. Thank you. We're now going to turn to additional student and public comment not related to the consent agenda. I'll quickly review guidelines because I know we've heard from a lot of people. The board office may follow up on any board-related issues that are raised during public testimony. We do request that any complaints about individual employees be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. And if you have additional materials or items that you'd like to provide to the board or the superintendent, you can email those to publiccomment@pps.net. That's public comment, all one word, at pps.net. As all of our speakers have already demonstrated, when you start, if you could clearly state your name and spell your last name, that would be great. And as they also have demonstrated, if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes, that would also be great. And with that, Ms. Bradshaw?
Yes. Craig Wilhelm.
Good evening. Welcome. My name is Craig Wilhelm, W-I-L-H-E-L-M. And I'm here tonight, happy to be here, happy to see wonderful students coming up here and talking. Boy, if I could have been as articulate as they are, that's amazing. So I am Oregon Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army. Last January, I provided public comments asking you to rescind resolution number 4503, requiring military counter recruiters in Portland public high schools. The resolution is a biased rule that destroys diversity, equity, and inclusion, and as it singles out the military, requiring one-for-one counter recruiters when visiting school grounds and limiting the access to only 3 times per year for military members. Other organizations, on the other hand, such as institutions of higher education, trade schools, nonprofits, they do not have counter recruiters. Having soldiers from the local communities participate regularly in school activities and functions without these limits, as these other traditional organizations are afforded, could provide much needed mentorship, guidance, and best-in-class resources for students and parents. Let's repeal the resolution. Right now, in this room that's named after a Lieutenant Colonel retired, Matthew Prophet, an Army colonel, his entire career as an Army colonel, retired Lieutenant Colonel, let's commit to working together to find ways to help support our students' futures. I'm here today because the Army wants to help PPS as a community partner. Our Portland Battalion stands ready to aid the district, especially as it relates to after-school and summer programs. Our Portland Battalion, through the partnerships of Portland State University, University of Portland, provide plug-and-play courses of instruction on a variety of topics, from leadership and professional development, anti-bullying, sexual harassment and assault prevention, resiliency, physical education, and well-being. Summer and after-school programs like these have had huge success in the state districts that we serve and are designed to engage students and give them the opportunity to fill their day with positive influences. A recent study released from the University of Chicago showed that youth who participate in a summer program like these, ones that offered structure opportunities, are half as likely to be arrested for violent crime. We would also like to work with you to establish the first ever junior ROTC program. It is an inexpensive way to provide even more opportunities for in-school mentorship, and the cost might be able to be covered by Measure 98 grant funds. It is not a recruiting program. It is simply a formal curriculum to motivate young people to be better citizens. JROTC graduated 92.8% of their students compared to the district average of 68.5% in many areas of the country. In closing, I strongly ask you to repeal the unconstitutional and biased resolution of 4503. There is no place for misleading and untruthful propaganda from counter recruiters. If you continue to allow military recruiters, you need to require the countering of all school visitors to include institutions of higher education, trades, nonprofits, first responders, etc. Instead, let us work all together to keep and support positive mentorship programs and show them how to be assets of their community. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Wilhelm. I would ask folks in the audience, you don't have to agree with the speakers, but if we could just maintain a civil discourse, that would be great.
Catherine Tucker.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks. Hello, I'm Catherine Tucker, Tucker. I am currently in my 8th year as media specialist at Marysville School. During my first few years at Marysville, it was a high-functioning school due to its systems and community. We have a great staff who get along, and the teaching partnerships all work really well together. In the last 5 years or so, we have been given 2 social-emotional skills SES classrooms and 2 pre-K classrooms, even though we are a Title I school that serves a houseless shelter and the NIA generation's community. All of these changes with minimal support have completely derailed our high-functioning school, and we are in crisis. Every day we are in a shelter-in-place emergency with our doors locked as we teach in the classroom. Our staff is being kicked, hit, bit, cursed at, and even groped this year. Some of our students feel it's necessary to check the halls to see if it's safe to leave the classroom. This is due to an increase in unsafe behaviors from some students. I am not here to blame these students. I am not here to blame our admin team who's been working themselves ragged to keep our school afloat. I am here to say that the system is not working. Some of these students in the SES classrooms are there due to improper placement, thus their needs are not being met. We have not had a certified SPED teacher in the classroom for almost 2 years, and it has taken a toll on the students. We have been told the reason the K2 SES classrooms aren't working this year is because we are not mainstreaming the students. Mainstream students need to have a para-educator with them when they go into the gen ed class to help with the transition. In doing so, that would take an adult out of the SES classroom, making it an unsafe environment. We were also told that a solution to the unsafe behaviors exhibited by one of the students was to have 2 para-educators be with them at all times, but weren't given any extra people to do this. Now, because of the lack of staff, the K2 room is disbanding for the year, and we are hoping the SES program will find a different building to be housed in next year. We are no longer able to serve these students. It's not just the SES class that is struggling, our gen ed classes are too. Students all over the country have been expected to come back to school without dealing with the trauma of the pandemic or lack of academics from being at home. Kindergarten students missed a lot of the socialization and preparation for school due to being at home for so long, and this can really be seen in their behaviors. We've had the rapid response team come out to Marysville multiple times this year, but it feels like they are not really helping. The plans aren't working, and we can't staff our school properly to help serve our students the way they need. Our school psychologist is working at 4 schools this year, and so it is difficult to have students evaluated for SPED or to have IEPs finished in a timely manner. And now we are expected to not only add more students to our school, but also add more staff, some that might even take the jobs of our current teachers. I was at the board meeting when the vote happened to merge with Lent. There was a presentation about how this would benefit Lent, but nothing was mentioned about the impact on Marysville or what's been happening there this year. It feels like we are not being heard and no one cares about us. We are happy to welcome new staff for our open positions, but it seems very unfair to have some of our staff be unassigned because a teacher from Lent wants to transfer. As I mentioned before, our school is out of balance, we are in crisis, but we still love our school and our community, and to think that it will have to change because some people will be replaced is heartbreaking. So I'm here to ask today that only the open positions be filled and that the staff from Lent be placed in other open positions in the district so we can maintain our community to stabilize our school. I am also here to ask that in the future, when these kinds of decisions are being made about the placement of programs and the mergings of school, that is done so with humanity and thoughtfulness to the impact of all the schools involved. Thank you.
Will Musser.
Hello, thanks for reading.
Musser, M-U-S-S-E-R, pronouns he and him. I'm here to speak again about foundation reform. Everyone wants to advance equity for all students. However, there's never been a consensus to operationalize what equity is, which makes it hard to craft board policy. While discussing the field trip equitable funding policy during a recent meeting, Director Brim Edwards said, "I would be an advocate of better versus perfect, and the size of the pie really makes a big difference, not just how we divide it. I couldn't agree more and hope that the board applies this lens to the discussion about LSFs as well, especially in light of last Tuesday's email about the dismal budget outlook. So let's review the size of the pie for the fund for PPS. Last year, 30 LSFs of 84 schools raised at least $10,000, ranging from $17,000 and change to $272,000 and change. $2.76 million was raised in total, with $1.95 million going to respective schools and roughly $811,000 going to the parent fund, which distributed 48 school grants of over $10K, 6 grants of $5K, and 2 grants of $10,000 for other PPS programs this year. So, 36% of our schools were responsible for this and for adding 42 positions across the entire district. The Reform PPS funding side labels the disparities in fundraising as inequitable and essentially seeks a district-wide fundraising model for equal distributions on a per-student basis across all schools. Negating disparities in fundraising won't advance equity because it'll reduce the size of the pie by a lot. They expect the same 36% to donate as much as they have in the past, when 2/3 of their donations benefited their communities after removing such an incentive. The top LSF raised an average of nearly $400K since 2017, but going forward under this model, that school would get under $120,000 a year in return for raising the same amount. Stakeholders, how do you think this will affect the size of the pie? The other side cites examples of non-urban school districts like Lake Oswego or Palo Alto, California, where this model has been successful. They have not publicized what happened in Austin, Texas, or Santa Monica and Malibu, California, when similar changes were pursued. Lastly, the board has often raised equitable outcomes in the LSF discussions, and I wanted to offer that maybe the lower reading scores exhibited by some school communities can be better explained by the fact that PPS relied on balanced literacy curricula until this year, when it switched to a more empirically supported phonics-based approach. It's quite likely that a curriculum change will improve reading scores much better than reforming the current LSF system. In a time of budgetary crisis and continued enrollment declines, any actions shrinking the size of the fundraising pie for PPS would be ill-timed, impractical, and yes, irresponsible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Smith-Warner.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. This is what retirement looks like. Good evening. It's Barbara Smith Warner, 3 words, no hyphen, SMITH, no hyphen, WARNER. Superintendent Guerrero, board members, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. As the Oregon House Chair of the 2018-2019 Student Success Committee, I was a primary author of the Student Success Act, which established the first dedicated source of funding for pre-K-12 education in Oregon in almost 30 years. I'm here tonight to testify to the legislative intent of that bill and how that intent should impact the district's contracted community-based organization schools, referred to as CBOs. The CBOs should receive annual equitable funding through the Student Investment Account. So I've been a PPS parent since 2008. I served as a legislator from 2014 to 2022. My belief in a strong, equitable public school system is what motivated me to run and to serve, and it drove the work that created the Student Success Act and the Student Investment Account as a way to provide more resources for all students, with a particular focus on those who have been historically underserved by our systems. The work that the CBO alternative schools do with students who have been unsuccessful at traditional schools or who have been failed by them is critical to providing a path to graduation and success in life for those kids. We talk all the time about how people have different paths and how important it is to provide those paths for our students, whether it's through career and technical education, sports, the arts, or something else that gets them and engages them. The path that the CBOs provide for their students is one of deep engagement and wraparound support, and their belief in those students enough to help them believe in themselves again. So this is my first public testimony before this board, and I want to thank all the members, the superintendent, all the staff, and everyone who does this work day in and day out. While I have been advocating for more funding for the CBOs for years, I want you to know that this time I do indeed have a conflict of interest. My daughter is currently enjoying her last and best year of high school at Mount Scott Learning Center, which is one of the district's CBO option schools. The pandemic struck in the spring of her 9th grade year and made a hard year even more difficult. Anxiety, deaths of some people close to her, and other mental health challenges prompted a series of unsuccessful moves from school to school. After establishing some stability at PPS's online learning academy last year, thank you OLA and thank you PPS for providing that, she was ready to go back to in-person for her senior year, but couldn't imagine being successful in a large traditional school. We visited a variety of alternative schools, both PPS and CBOs. Her mom may have known a little bit about the wide variety of options that there were, and she chose Mount Scott. And since this year started, I have watched and listened as week by week and month by month, she has thrived. The staff and the community provide motivation, education, and inspiration both for my daughter and for every student there. So the CBO programs and the PPS students they deserve, I'm really on my last 2 lines. I know about that, the timer. The CBO programs and the PPS students they serve deserve as much overall funding as the in-district option schools like Alliance High School, and the Student Investment Act funding provides the district with very specific means to demonstrate that ongoing commitment to fully serving those students. I know that there will be many tough budget decisions as you await the next biennium's funding levels in Salem, and I'm sorry that I won't be there to help make it as high as possible. I'd say that's about the only reason I'm sorry that I won't be there. But today, I'm here to specifically ask that you do support the CBO's proposal to directly pass through $27.86 per student in student investment account funding for every PPS student that's being served at those CBOs. Thank you so much, and thank you again for your service, all of you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Efrain Rivas Flores.
Good evening. My name is Efrain Rivas Flores. Rivas, R-I-V-A-S, hyphen Flores, F-L-O-R-E-S. I'm the Senior Director of College Access Programs at Portland Community College. I'm pleased to be here this evening in support of the partnership between Portland Public Schools and the contracted community-based organizations. I want to thank Superintendent Guerrero and members of the school board for their hard work and dedication to include CBOs within PPS framework, for serving all students equitably in the district, especially the 20% of historically underserved students who do not make it to graduation in traditional settings on a 4-year timeline. Inclusion in student investment accounts and equity fund has been critical support to the CBOs, and I commend the school board and district leadership for making this a priority. As years come and go, however, consistency and continuity are crucial to serve PPS students in these programs over time, so they can reach graduation and post-secondary success. Building programs and sustaining them requires more than a one-time input. While we know there are many competing budget priorities, the small size of these programs make us susceptible to the ebb and flow of funding, and we simply can't sustain shiftings from year to year. Due to Portland Public Schools previously including CBOs in student investment account funding, PCC's Gateway and Yes to College programs have been able to hire 2 mental health counselors. In addition to the direct counseling support, they're developing a mentor-mentee program for next school year and are collaborating with our college success coaches to extend our college guidance courses offerings. Establishing and building programs and services like this depends on stability and continuity. Consistent equitable funding from student investment account is necessary so that PPS students attending community-based organizations receive the services they need and deserve. The CBOs have long-standing successful partnership with Portland Public Schools, and the CBOs continue to serve high percentage of the exact student population the student investment account are meant to serve. I respectfully request you support the CBO's proposal to allocate $2,786 in student investment account funding per PPS student being served at the community-based organization. This will help strengthen the transparency and consistency for this valuable work we have all undertaken. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw, and thanks everyone again for your comments. You can feel free to connect with Roseanne Powell, our board manager, if you have anything specifically you'd like to follow up on with the board or the board office. Next up, also part of our public comment is, I believe President Bonilla from the Portland Association of Teachers is here. Welcome, President Bonilla. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Hello. Okay. I have Jackie Dixon here, our PAT Vice President. Good evening, board directors, superintendent, student representative. As always, I will start with kudos. So kudos to both the PAT and PPS management bargaining teams for spending 2 whole days going through multiple articles in our proposals. It's a lot of hard work, and I appreciate everyone taking that time to get that done. Also, kudos to Jonathan Garcia, Courtney Westling, and Lisa Merrick from the government relations team. They have kept in communication and collaboration with Jackie and me about our shared priorities. So PAT, we have a few trainings planned around legislative lobbying and canvassing for our members, and PPS has several future efforts planned to engage families. So I'm sure that we're going to be able to strongly advocate for our schools. And some of these priorities are around increasing the state school fund budget, and increasing funds to attract and retain educators in special ed and other hard-to-fill positions. So before we begin, I'd love to ground us in our community. Jackie and I are going to read In Lakesh, which is a Mayan-inspired poem that many educators use to set the tone for their classroom community. And folks are more than, are invited to follow along if they already know. So I'll read the Spanish and Jackie will read the English. Tú eres mi otro yo.
You are my other me.
Si te hago daño a ti,
If I do harm to you,
me hago daño a mí mismo.
I do harm to myself.
Si te amo y respeto,
If I love and respect you,
me amo y me respeto yo.
I love and respect myself.
So I bring this to your attention because after my last testimony at the school board, I felt that we had lost sight a little bit of the sentimiento, that you are my other me. And so last time I thought I was following the rules of this body by not identifying Director Hollins as the owner of the quote that I shared. And so when Director Hollins interrupted my statement to ensure I named him, I did. And then after that, my testimony became a dialogue between myself and this body. I welcome dialogue when that's the expectation. And my understanding has always been that we don't engage in a conversation during board testimony. So I was surprised that I was interrupted repeatedly, and I was surprised it was happening, and I was surprised that no one called the meeting back into order. I now understand that there was a concern that I was sharing the quote from the school board work session in bad faith as a way to politicize those comments, but the comments I wanted to share but was unable to finish went as followed. I'm having a hard time reconciling the harsh language said at that board work session, where Director Hollins said, when we have cancer, we gotta get rid of the cancer. You don't try to talk to the cancer, you don't try to do some professional development around the cancer, you get rid of it. And I asked, are we the cancer? During the last board meeting, Director Hollins clarified that he was discussing educators who do things like put hands on students or say the N-word towards students. And then he asked why the union contract protects those teachers. So I want to make sure to make it clear and state it here without interruption what I looked up last meeting. When an educator is accused of wrongdoing, the school administration and PPS management conduct an investigation around those claims. However, the length of that investigation is up to administrators, not the union. And if an administrator believes an educator is directly harming students, they can remove that educator immediately, which they do with any allegations of physical abuse. And when the decision is, or which they can do with any allegations of physical abuse. When this decision is handed down, an educator has 30 days to appeal or accept the consequence. I know that the last meeting tensions were high. However, I respectfully request that I be provided the same respect and dignity that any other person who testifies before this board is entitled to, no more and no less. I struggled over whether to discuss this tonight, but came to the conclusion that I can't ignore what happened. I've received an apology from our student rep, which happened the same night in both writing and person, but I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for us to work to repair that harm.
We believe that the way to repair the harm that all parties feel is to model what we practice in schools known as restorative justice with a restorative circle. We'd like to invite you to hold that circle where all parties can share their experience and answer the restorative circle questions. Those questions are, what happened? What were you thinking at that time? What have you thought about since? Who has been affected by what you've done, in what way? And what do you think you need to do to make things right? We know there's a rule about public meetings for this body. I wonder if y'all were to hold an executive session for this circle, if this could give us all the space to be honest and human.
And so when I originally brought up these remarks, I brought them up to illuminate the reality of the experience of not only our students of color, but all of us. We put it in our contract and have advocated for over 2 years for training on anti-racism, implicit bias, and culturally responsive practices. In the past few months, PPS has attempted to touch on these concepts during cadres through a slide and a short conversation. But we've seen that educators, they've reported that it's been varied, that experience, and when we were told by a senior director in HR that they'd bring to y'all the date of April 11th for an implicit bias training for all educators, we were excited, but I was told that it was later not approved by this body. It's challenging to hear board members continue to blame educators for not being culturally competent when time for this professional development has been denied year after year.
It feels like gaslighting.
My experience as a Black Latina educator tells me that we must teach folks what we expect of them so that we can hold them accountable to this expectation. I have to remind you, we have not had a district-wide systemic racial equity training since 2017. That's almost 6 years. A new educator who is white, born and raised in a place like Portland, Oregon, may have never had a conversation about race before teaching, or received any training on how to facilitate tough conversations about race or experiences with racism at school with students. And that's a failure on many levels, but we have a responsibility to make sure that they have the training before and while they serve our students. How can we hold them accountable if we can't meet them where they are and train them? And to be sure, trust, PAT is also doing our work. We understand that our union and the broader labor movement also has a lot of work to do and history to reckon with. And in fact, PAT has a 5-part racial equity training available to all of our members, and we've opened it up to the members of the other locals as well. We've trained at least 100 educators who attended our representative retreat this fall, and we offer session 2 of 5 in the next few weeks. But we as a union cannot mandate our members to take this training. We did fight for the training to be required by PPS in our contract. So that's why I quoted Director Hollins, because I wanted to make sure that we all owned what it is that we need to own for this change to happen. We're going to continue to provide the training that we provide to all the parties that are interested. And what we need is for y'all to step up and follow our contract language to ensure every educator receives this training, not just those who opt in. So please help us move this work forward for those who directly work with our students. Please believe us when we say that we want to serve our Black and brown students well. We just need to make sure every single person has the training they need to do that work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, President Bonilla. And And I will just say I really appreciate your comments, and I like the idea of a restorative circle. I do know state law is somewhat restrictive in terms of what we can do, but I'm perfectly happy to ask our general counsel whether there's any way to do that as a full board. And if there's not, I do hope we can have smaller conversations that don't violate public meetings law. And then the other thing I'll just say, and I want to be careful about this because bargaining doesn't happen here. It has to happen, and it should happen in other places. But I know that it's come up a few times, the idea of a professional development day and the April 11th day. And I'll only speak just on behalf of myself that I really do want to see that. My concern was not about the day. It was about that we would have to remove a student learning day. And that was my only concern, right? And so if there's any other way we can do that, speaking purely on my own behalf, I would love to see and figure out if there's a way we can do that doesn't reduce student learning. With that, I think we'll move on unless somebody has something they'd like to add.
So I guess the thing I would like to add is I want to apologize that I didn't say something at the meeting because under the contract, the PAT president has the right to make remarks, and when the conversation just went on and on, I could have said something and I didn't, so I'm going to own that I didn't say something that we shouldn't have interrupted or had a discussion, and it doesn't mean that we didn't all want to engage or respond in some way to the comments that were made. But just like we listen to public comment, I think if we, because it's a contractual right, if we have a comment or we want to engage, that we can do it after the meeting or set up a time to have that engagement. And so I'm just speaking for myself. I want to apologize that your comments were interrupted repeatedly.
All right, any other comments before we move on? Okay. Thank you again, President Bonilla, and thank you to everyone who testified tonight. Student Representative McMahon, it is time for your student report.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Okay, where to begin? All right. So following, obviously, this is our first official, hi everybody. This is our first official board meeting of February, and therefore the first board meeting that falls within Black History Month. And so I have the opportunity to serve alongside some amazing Black students on the District Student Council, and I just wanted to name them. Kendall Bishop, who's sitting right here, JJ and Danny Cage, as well as Jamel from our Metropolitan Learning Center. And these, as I think we've heard earlier, I think a lot of times we forget that there is so much success that is resulted, and obviously that is despite the odds, but that just is more of a testament to the strength of the students that overcome it and a strength of the people that overcome it. And so Portland is a very white city. All of the students who are Black within our district go to very white schools, unfortunately, in which they're not appreciated, and many times their experience is overlooked. So I just wanted to say it's very hard to succeed in this city, and certainly hard to succeed when you see no one like you, which unfortunately happens all too often. So I wanted to say kudos for all of the amazing students that I get to work alongside, as well as the amazing students I have the privilege of representing on this board. Thank you for all the work you do, and I hope that you don't lose the sight of how essential you are to this community, and certainly how much, for the individuals that I named, how much you help me every day. Okay, so moving past that, there's a little poster here, which I don't think anyone can see on the video, unfortunately, but it's about our PPS Student Summit. Oh, look at the fancy camera work. That's impressive. Okay, our PPS District Student Summit is going to be happening this month on the 24th. There's a QR code down there, which you probably won't be able to scan, but if you go to our Instagram, which is just PPS Student Council, there will be the opportunity for students to sign up. We're going to be addressing a lot of really important topics which have gotten a lot of airtime both in this boardroom as well as to the many schools that I've had the opportunity to visit this year. So if you are a student in high school and you're interested coming, please find that link. There's a form where you can RSVP. We really appreciate the student support. All too often, this boardroom is so inaccessible for students. And I mean, it's so challenging to come up here and sit there when we're kind of looming over you. But I hope that a room full of peers in which you really know that your voice is going to be heard, and where me and all of the other students on DSC are really going to make sure that it is, that you feel comfortable really sharing the problems that you're seeing, because as we hear all the time, it is not joyful for anyone, and certainly not for students a lot of the time, and we need to make sure that we're really listening to what students' needs are. And then I think the final thing, which I've just been talking a lot about in my student reports, is we hear every single meeting from students across the district, from teachers across the district, from parents, that there are so many issues. And I talked about this when I went on Think Out Loud, but we are looking and going into a budget session in which we might not be able to pay for what we need, let alone what we want. And so I think if we are expected and if we want to solve all of these huge issues which are so pervasive in our district, then that money needs to come from somewhere. And I think Barbara Smith Warner said it great, but we need the legislature to step up here, and we need the funding that these students and our students and students across this state deserve, because we are not anywhere close to getting back to where we were before the pandemic, and even I would argue that where we were before the pandemic is not necessarily our goal. And so I think that now is an important time to show that investment, and if you say you love the students, then show us the money. Thank you.
I just want to encourage everybody to listen to that Think Out Loud segment that Bryony mentioned. She absolutely rocked it. It was a really thoughtful conversation around student safety. You were incredible, and one of the things I appreciated about your leadership there was how nuanced you were in being really careful not to represent student voice as being sort of monolithic and unified, because there are a lot of different perspectives and opinions, and I thought you handled that really well, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, and also there were other students, Danny Cage, who's from Grant, and Lana, who's from Franklin, also got the opportunity to be part of that conversation. And I would encourage, I said this in my tweet, but I would encourage state legislatures to also take a listen. It's such an important conversation. A lot of the times it is. Student voice is seen as this very monolithic. Let's just throw that out there. But ultimately, like, student safety is a student issue and affects us every day. And then beyond that, it's a teacher issue and affects teachers inside the building. Those are the people we should listen to, and I can tell you all of us are saying, hey, we need the resources. Yeah, so I encourage you to listen to that. And thank you, Amy. I really appreciate that.
Great. Thank you. Next up on our agenda, board, committee, and conference reports. And I won't go down the line. I'll just ask if there are any committee or conference reports that board members would like to provide.
Two. So first, just as the board liaison to the Climate Crisis Response Committee, they meet quarterly. They had a meeting the other day. They approved their draft work plan for the year, and also a presentation at the greenhouse gas inventory. And I'm going to circulate it for the board and post it, but it's a great start to measuring how we're going to measure this really bold and aggressive climate policy, but really impressive work by staff in coordination with the committee. Also, they selected a vice chair of the committee. It's Danny Cage. So our student leadership, once again, on display. And then the last thing is they adopted a recommendation to the board that the non-student members of the committee be renewed for an additional 2 years to really maximize the service, because otherwise you have members that have 1 year, that will only have a 1 year term in which they'll only meet 4 times. So I'll be sending that in to board leadership for the agenda setting for a future meeting at the committee's request. And then the second piece is the levy, the local option levy committee met early on last fall to look at when we might refer out a local option renewal. The decision was made to wait till after the legislative session because we have some legislation that may impact that in the future. But there was an additional request of the committee to see if there was anything that could be done before we have that renewal that would potentially impact some sort of referral that we could do that would impact the amount of revenue in a positive way for this next budget year. And I'm appreciative that Carol Samuels, who's an outside consultant, and the district staff really sort of, I think, looked at all the options, knowing that this is going to be a tough budget year. And based on that, and based on a lot of vetting and looking at a variety of different options, really there is not anything that could be referred that would impact this next budget cycle, anything that would in a material way have an impact. So really this will be up to the legislative team to hopefully get something through, and then we'll use that as the foundation for the referral next year. But I really appreciate the staff, the finance team and the budget team, the superintendent, general counsel, and for looking at what possibly we could do and really trying to think of innovative ways to make it happen. But there aren't any options this upcoming cycle. But I'm optimistic for the future, and I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity on Courtney Wessling's close to last day. I know she's not here. She told me she wasn't going to be here, but I want to just recognize Courtney because hopefully, I want to say it publicly, she's been here in sort of, I think, some of the hardest days of this district. And, one time she had 6 or 7 different jobs. And, in 2019, she did an amazing job at getting through some changes to the local options statute with Representative Barbara Swift Warner, who was here earlier, which gave us a lot more resources to work with. And so I just want to recognize Courtney as she goes on to her next chapter. And I know because of where she's going, we won't totally lose sight of her, but just want to. I'm giving my committee report. I'm gonna miss her this spring when she's got a great teammate that she's has moving into her place, but we will miss Courtney.
Thanks. Director Green?
Yes, I got it written down so that I don't mess it up and talk forever. And I want to say thank you to Karina for making sure that I didn't say too much. I just said enough. The Le Mans French Immersion K-8 charter renewal is currently in process. We presented the information at our meeting last week, and the public hearing is currently scheduled for next week, Wednesday on the 15th, from 5 to 6 p.m. for anybody that wants to come out. It should come before the whole board at the March 7th board meeting, at which point we'll be able to hear from the school, the kids. I asked them if they could bring the kids. It's always better to hear from the kids than to hear from the adults when they get up here and they do their stuff. And they're going to show us that they know way more French than we do, make us feel dumb, and all that kind of carrying on. But I love the baby. So, but that's all I've got.
Thank you.
I want to just give a brief report. Last week, I joined the Oregon School Boards Association delegation in Washington, D.C. for the National School Boards Association's Equity Conference, and also their Advocacy Institute, in which we had an opportunity to speak with our senators, Merkley and Wyden, and my favorite congressman, Earl Blumenauer, about some of the issues facing the schools in Oregon, to just let them know what was happening with social emotional learning, learning loss, and of course, school safety, which is on everyone's mind. We were there for one reason, and that was to ask for funding to help us, recover from COVID, and to thank them for the monies that have already come our way. I also learned while I was there that Portland Public Schools earned a Magna Award from the National School Boards Association for our climate work. So I wanted to commend Director Brum Edwards and the students and staff who worked on this policy to get it where it's getting national recognition. So That's it for me.
Thank you. Any others? No.
Not necessarily a report, but we have a facilities and operations meeting tomorrow. And one of the things that's going to be on the agenda is the bond planning and update for Harriet Tubman.
Great. All right. Thank you. Next up, Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce our next agenda item?
Yes, Chair. As you're familiar, each year we're required to provide a division, what's referred to as a Division 22 community report on the prior year's compliance with the educational standards that the Oregon Legislature and State Board determined must be met in order to be considered a standard school district. We actually provided that required report at the October 25th board meeting. However, tonight we are providing a relevant update regarding programs and services for students identified as talented gifted, which Deputy Superintendent Dr. Proctor will explain here.
So, as it's understood, again, the staff delivered that report on October 25th at the board meeting. In that meeting, PPS staff declared that the district is under corrective action for OAR 581 and such, 022-2500 programs and services for TAG students. While we declared a corrective action for this OAR, we certified compliance with the ruling, rights of parents and TAG students, and identification of academically talented and intellectually gifted students. In the Oregon Department's review, they determined that PPS also needed to declare corrective actions for these other two TAG OARs because of our TAG conciliation agreement. So we're just presenting this today just to, present again to the board so that there is a full understanding. Again, we declared that we were in corrective action, but in compliance. And they said, because you're in corrective action, you're not in compliance. So I think we just needed to clarify the language.
Great, thank you. Any board questions about this item?
Yes, I think so.
That was the corrective action, yeah?
That's it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Okay, next up, board goals, graduation and post-secondary readiness. So last June, the board approved some updated student outcome goals. These included a goal to achieve accelerate achievement for students of color by eliminating graduation gaps. We also call out post-secondary readiness as an indicator that we want to see regular reports on. And Superintendent Guerrero, I think that's what we have tonight.
Yes, thank you, Chair Scott. We certainly appreciate the board's continued focus on student outcome and achievement goals. This is another regular opportunity to update you all and the community. We want to keep the academic achievement at the center of our work. Of course, our goal continues to be to eliminate the opportunity and outcome gaps, and one of those key indicators is our graduation rates, which were recently released. So Dr. Renard Adams is here to talk about where we are in the successful completion or achievement across a number of areas: career technical education, visual and performing arts, pathways, dual credit coursework, advanced placement, seal of biliteracy attainment, international baccalaureate, and overall college readiness, all indicators that our board indicated. So Dr. Renard, we'll turn it over to you.
Appreciate that. Ms. Bradshaw, could you make me, am I in the right room? Cue up the PowerPoint here.
remember the days when we would just get a hard copy.
All right, now we're ready. Good evening again, board directors and student representative McMahon. Pleased to be before you tonight to share our winter data dive into our graduation rate and our post-secondary readiness measures for the class of 2022. Our guiding questions for this evening are on the screen before you. We're, of course, wondering what the graduation rate for the class of 2022 is, and I know that's already been spoiled by a memo in the news media, and how that compares to the state of Oregon. What are our high school graduation rates, and then how did the class of 2022 perform on indicators of post-secondary readiness? We're going to begin with graduation rate, but first, we had some high school systemic leaders here with us tonight, and I know some of them, not all of them, have been able to stay, but I did want to recognize those that were here. We had, or do have, if you're here, if you could please stand. We have Erica Stavis from CBOs, Dr. Philippe Hristig from IW Wells Barnett. Yeah, I know some of them had to leave. We have Ms. Dion Hernandez and Shannon Freudenthal from OLA, and we also have had Elizabeth Ellis from Virtual Scholars. So I just wanted to recognize them because none of this is possible without our leaders at the secondary level and their staffs, their incredibly dedicated staffs and the families that they serve. So on this slide, you have our 4-year cohort graduation rate in red, and then you have our 5-year completion rate in blue. As you can see, our current graduation rate and completion rates are the highest in PPS history since the 4-year cohort graduation rate was implemented in the state of Oregon. I know, that's it's good news. I like having a little bit of good news so that Director Green doesn't always hate me. For the class of 2022, our graduation rate is 85.7%, which is an increase of 1.3 percentage points over the class of 2021. Additionally, as you can see, our 5-year completion rate is now at 90%, which is a slight improvement over the class of 2021. Statewide, graduation rate did increase, but we outpaced them, and the statewide 5-year completion rate dipped, so this is good news overall. When we think about our rate compared to the state, PPS continues to outperform the state of Oregon in 4-year grad rate. For the class of 2022, again, Oregon posted a grad rate of 81.3%, while PPS's graduation rate was 4.4 percentage points higher at 85.7. Also, if you're curious, Multnomah County, they established a graduation rate for the entire county, and that rate is 79.1%. This screen shows our graduation and completion rates by race over the past 3 years. The differential graduation and completion rates are often stark. Our student groups with the highest rates include our Asian, white, and multiracial students who are white and Asian. There's currently a 10-point gap between our black and white students in terms of graduation. I'll give you a minute to look at that.
Depending on how your brain works, it's kind of upside down. So the most recent year is
at
on
the top.
top.
Yes.
I was a little alarmed at first.
Just a question about the graduation. Which year was it that the essential skills test became no longer required?
I may have this incorrect because I was not here in Oregon, but I believe that, I thought that happened during COVID.
That's what I'm just wondering. I can't remember if it's
So that
2021 or 21.
If it happened during COVID, it would have been March or the spring of 2020. If you're okay, I'll continue. Here are the one-year differences in graduation rates comparing the classes of between the class of 2021 and 2022. As you can see, the African American grad rate has increased by almost 4 percentage points, which outpaced the increase in the grad rate for white students. So we've got a little bit of a narrowing of the gap there, which is more good news. While the Native American and Pacific Islander rates have also increased, I just want to always offer caution in that interpretation because those are really small groups of students, usually maybe somewhere between 15 and 25 students. So 1 or 2 students graduating or not really can wildly swing those data. Also notably, our Latinx graduation rate decreased this year compared to 2021 or 2021.
Dr. Adams, that's a larger group, right?
Yes, it is a larger
Latinx.
group. Yes, it is roughly about twice as large as our African American group. Maybe a little bit more.
And I saw Asian students also dropped a little bit.
A little bit.
Do we have any insight into what's going on there?
I do not. I was hoping to have Drs. Armstrong and Franco here with me, but they are both ill. So I prepped them to help me with these answers, but they are unable to respond and be with us tonight. What I do know is, as we shared last year, increasing graduation rate is really about keeping students engaged, providing them with direct supports. We did a spring survey. We do an annual spring survey on behalf of the secondary Office of Teaching and Learning team of students. And what the students have told us is one of the things they want is more information into post-secondary readiness and more individualized time and attention from counselors and teachers. And so we know when you know students by name and need, you can make a huge difference, right? And so I think we know we still have work to do. We're not satisfied with these data. They don't say 100% yet, which is what we want. And anytime there's a dip, it can be concerning, especially when it's with our larger groups of students and students of color. But I don't have an explanation that I can share at this time. What we're looking at now are the year-to-year differences in our 5-year completion rates for students by race. And again, you can see there were some swings here as well. Here are our graduation rates for each high school. With the exception of 2 schools, all high schools earned graduation rates above 82%. And for this year in particular, Cleveland High School reached a grad rate of over 90%, so we're really proud of that work. And you're going to help it be even higher next year, Byron.
Yeah. Highest year yet, I promise you.
As was the case with graduation rate, when we look at 5-year completion rates by school, we can see that almost all schools have 5-year completion rates of at least 83% or higher. Overall, PPS continues to see progress in the percentage of students who graduate within either 4 or complete within 5 years. This is a testament to the hard work of our principals, their educators and staff, our students, and their families. I do want to also add it is not highly typical to see graduation rates as large as ours for urban districts. So I think we're doing nice work there. Again, not satisfied, knowing we still have some gaps that we need to address.
So this 5-year completion rate is 4 or 5 years?
No, it's 5 years, I'm sorry. What my statement was, we still continue to have to show increases in our 4-year grad rate and our 5-year completion rates. My apologies if my comment caused you some confusion there, Director Constam. This is the 5-year completion rate.
I'm not sure. I think I have the same question Amy does.
Yeah, because it's like 96.8% for Benson. So I think that means it's our 4-year completers and our 5-year completers there, all together. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
So this is like out of the people that stayed in high school for 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
People who got a diploma after the 4-year mark, people who completed the GED requirements. There's a couple different categories of completion that go into the 5-year rate as opposed to the 4-year rate.
Wait, now I think I'm confused now. because I thought I was with Amy, but that was your answer to Byron was different. So just take Alliance because it's probably the easiest one. So the 4-year was 30-something%. That
Sorry.
it's 30-something, but so that means that the 30% something graduated in 4 years. Now we lost that. The 5-year is 60%. That's not a 30 plus another 30. It's if you were there the 5th year, 61% of those graduated.
Of all the students, yes.
Of all the students, or just the 5th year?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Okay, so there are 2 different measurements. So it's if you stayed at Alliance for 5 years, you had a 60% graduation rate, and those that were there 4 years were 30%. Not at the 5th year we had 60% either graduating at the 4th year or the 5th year.
Right.
It's not an addition.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes. And I'm forgive me again if I've confused you. At last year's graduation conversation, I believe it was Director Constan was talking about our 5th year completion rate, so I wanted to include it this time around.
Oh, I was
so
just
as
about
not-
to talk about them again because I'm so
as to
proud
not-
of them.
Yeah, so as
And I'm
not
so
leave them out, right?
do for them.
Yes.
Dr. Adams, before you go on to the post-secondary readiness, when we see some of the differences, and this is maybe a question for the superintendent, you know, and I want to say these graduation rates are great, right? And to see this difference between, you know, whatever it was when he started at 72 and up to 90% is incredible district-wide. And a lot of our high schools are very similar, but then you see like Roosevelt's a bit of an outlier. How do we address that? How do you address that, superintendent, as sort of moving forward when you see a school like that feels like it's out of line with where our other high schools are?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm going to let
Sorry, I went the wrong way.
Margaret Calvert weigh in here, since this is her area of responsibility. But we do see you do observe the variability there. We think it's a multi-pronged approach here. Obviously, engaging and connecting with our students, having the adequate supports. There's been a great deal of work over the years, which we attribute for what you see here across all of our high schools regarding our high school success plan elements, as well as, you know, a great job of our reconnection services and our multiple pathways, you know, capturing kids who otherwise, you know, we might not see here on the screen. But Margaret, do you want to elaborate a little bit about how we think about the uneven outcomes here?
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me? Sorry. Yep, thanks. Good evening, directors, Superintendent Guerrero, Student Representative McMahon. So there are a couple of things that we're looking for as we are building out plans. There are a couple of things I just wanted to share. Part of the high school success plan that we've built, so we're in the 2nd iteration of it, really addresses some specific strategies that we're trying to employ across the district. So what we're seeing are the freshman success teams that are looking and really building on getting students engaged and connected. We have student attendance coaches that are working to, again, help get students connected and into classrooms. We're seeing the implementation of new curriculum and a focus on instruction as we're rolling forward. When we look across the system, we certainly are looking at what are the specific needs of students at each of the schools. So our student populations are slightly different at each of the schools. What we're working with Roosevelt on in particular is how to connect all of their students. They've seen a growing population over the last number of years, so they have seen increasing numbers of students coming to Roosevelt. And then also how are they addressing the needs of the students. So part of what we're seeing for this particular cohort was through the pandemic. And we had some real significant and unique challenges in North Portland that I think have been highlighted around connectivity and various other pieces. So we're looking at how do we, what are the specific needs of the students, and then how are we moving them forward. But in particular, we're using some of the strategies that we see at McDaniel and Roosevelt, and then we're starting to build out, can we get that acceleration and movement. We're anticipating that, and we look at various credit completion rates and things that we're seeing in as we go through, using summer school and various other things. One of the things that we're very excited about this year is that Portland Evening Scholars, we've been able to actually have a site at Roosevelt. So if you can think about how isolated North Portland is, it is providing access to students to do credit completion actually in the neighborhood and not having to travel as they have in the past to Benson. So there's some strategies that we're looking at, and we're using school improvement plans and reviewing those with our principals and really digging into specific strategies. They're doing some very unique work around student attendance right now that we are seeing some fruits both this year and then going into the future.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's talk about post-secondary readiness.
Before we
Oh, sure.
Before we transition to a different topic, just a question about sort of I guess the next click down layers. Did you look at, in the past we've talked about this issue of like, you know, with the state having temporarily lifted the essential skills test as another thing that's in addition to the required credits. But we've talked about the fact that the state allows that students to earn credits for a D, which is less than proficient, and that count towards graduation. I'm wondering if looking under the numbers if we're noticing any trends like that came out of the pandemic, like in a particular topic or subject area, or overall whether students were, because I think the next set of data gives us a little bit more of like how they did maybe on some more rigorous classes, but you know there's the big difference between getting an A and a D, and so I'm wondering if there was any sort of analysis done of like what happened during the pandemic, or so I guess
that's a great question. I know that for this presentation we did not do an analysis, but what I can tell you is that our high schools, as a part of their continuous improvement planning, do examine students' grades at different points during the school year and do analyses on those. That's included as a part of our principal and teacher dashboard, so that a principal, he, she, or they could take a glance across all the different types of courses in their building and look at the pass rates and the cumulative grade point averages. I don't know if Ms. Calvert has anything else she'd like to add to that.
I think that coming out of the pandemic, one of the things that there are a number of things we've learned about online learning. So, and how to do learning completion that has been really dramatically different than sort of how we did school prior to the pandemic. There were certain areas that we saw, and I don't know that they're overly surprising, but we saw that students did not complete credits often in certain subject areas, right? So world language was a challenge during online learning, and we're seeing some efforts to recover that, as was, again, it's near and dear to my heart, but it's also heartbreaking to watch that math learning during distance learning is something that we're being very focused about how to support kids as they're coming back. So those are a couple of the areas that we have seen some targeted and specific efforts to support students. That shows up in virtual scholars classes, for example, evening scholars, and then some concerted work at the school level with specifically mathematics, and actually the new textbook adoptions really are providing some opportunities for there to be very specific supports for students.
It's also notable to recognize that our school communities have been engaging in a dialogue around equitable grading policies, and so it's, you know, how do we shift the focus to a mastery or proficiency of content concepts versus, you know, penalizing kids that result in grades that aren't reflective of what they've learned.
Thank you for those questions. Always appreciate them. Always gives me insight into the next time and what to bring forward and talk about. So one secondary measure of success, of course, is our grad rate. Another that this board was very much interested in was how prepared students are for college and career by measures that we could establish. And so just as a reminder to the general public, prior to adopting the graduation rate as a board goal in June of 2021, the board had a high school goal for students centered on post-secondary readiness. So we're going to talk about that next. These are among the indicators. There's one that we added because it is an indicator of post-secondary readiness, even though it is not, had not been explicitly stated by this board, because we thought it would be useful to also look at that, and that is the sixth one, talking about successful attainment of a post-secondary readiness score on the PSAT, the SAT, or the ACT. But when we talk about these indicators, we're talking about being successful, C or better in advanced placement courses, 3 or more international baccalaureate courses, dual credit courses, or successful completion of a career and technical pathway. And also we're thinking about the seal, achieving the seal of biliteracy. So let's jump right in. Overall, post-secondary readiness are shown on the screen along with the previous board goal in red for context. Oh, was there a question? I'm sorry.
Dr. Adams. Sorry, the PSA, SAT, and ACT, can you remind me what we require? Because over the years we've changed
What we
that.
provide, sure.
Well, because I know it was like at one point everybody was taking the SAT, like everybody had an SAT day, and then it changed to ACT, and I think we changed back. So what is it that is the, kind of the standard across the district?
Sure, give me 1 second, I have that
Sorry.
note here. No, it's fine. So we provide the PSAT to all sophomores and the SAT to all juniors at all high schools. CTE programming is at all high schools. IB programming is at Cleveland and Lincoln. And then AP courses are at Benson, Roosevelt, Grant, Wells, McDaniel, and Franklin.
Yeah, and the ACT is,
ACT,
that's just like an optional?
It is.
Okay.
It's something that students take as an optional assessment, typically provided at a national testing site, usually on the weekends.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. So here we have, again, the former board goal at 56% in red. Data are shown for the last 4 years with the most recent data on the top. Thank you, Director Constant, for reminding me to point that out. As you can see, readiness did decrease overall and for each student group. On the next few slides, we'll unpack that and each of the post-secondary indicators. I just want to note for the public that this is an updated slide deck that was posted later to board book because we found a calculation error where the all students group was not summing up all of the different student groups properly. So we did correct that and send that to the board, and that is now posted on board book. Let's start with advanced placement work. Shown on the screen are the percentages of students who earn a C or better in at least 3 AP courses. You will note that between this year and last year, the overall percentage has decreased, and the percentages of students meeting the indicator has decreased for all student groups except for our Pacific Islander students. And again, that's a small and variable student group. So we need to interpret that with caution.
And this is for students that get a C or above?
C or above in 3 courses. Yes, ma'am.
So is this reflective of just the students who are taking 3 AP classes, or is it reflective of that subset of all the students that happen to take 3 classes?
Sure, this is of the students who took 3 AP courses.
This is how many had a C or better?
This is the percentage that had
Okay,
a C or
that's
better.
pretty interesting.
And do we have any idea of, like, was it very common, like many students are taking 3 APs, or was it like a lot of the population was taken out, so we're looking at small?
So that's a really great question. So I believe data that was shared with the board was by school. One of the things I've raised in the past in thinking about this particular set of indicators is equity of access, because all of these indicators aren't available at all of our high schools. And so that does play a part in how we should interpret these data. Because if I'm, for example, at a high school where there are no AP courses, I don't have the opportunity, even if I potentially have the ability and the skill to be successful in those courses.
So students do have access to an AP courses, IB courses, or dual credit. So all high schools are providing one of those, but they're not providing all of them necessarily.
I want to make sure I heard what you said, Dr. Adams. The population we're talking about in this slide are only people who have taken 3? I think it's all students, right?
No, it's all students. Excuse
Okay.
me.
I didn't think that 80% of students who took 3 AP courses had
No,
gotten
it's all-
lower than a
it's all-
C. Okay, all students. That makes more sense. Thank you.
Right, and we did provide those numerators and denominators where we could as additional material. Again, thinking forward for next time how to package that so that the slide is still readable and you have the information that you need.
Sorry, one more question. Do we know how that compares to other large urban school districts? So I'm just thinking of this one in particular, roughly 1 out of every 5 of our high school students took 3 or more classes, got a C or better. Is that a good number? Is that a low number?
What I can say is many of the measures aren't universal, if that makes sense. So the idea that ACT and SAT and PSAT have a cut score is universal. And so districts using that would all be using those same cut scores. The idea of career and technical pathways is sort of a universal idea and concept. But I would need to do further analyses to really think about how we are comparing across the nation in districts that use the same indicators as we do. And it would be interesting because a lot of districts don't look at 2 different high school measures simultaneously. And many of them, although many districts do have college and career readiness offices who analyze these data.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Next, we'll take a look at the percentage of students who completed a career and technical pathway. Overall, good news here is the percentages have increased year over year for all students, except for a slight decrease for students who are multiracial, who are underserved. So those are students who select multiracial, and within that selection, they identify as one of their ancestries being Black or Latino or a Native American or Pacific Islander. The overall percentage of students completing 3 or more dual credit courses decreased from 2021 to 2022. The overall decreases were observed for our Black students, our Native students, our Latinx students, our multiracial, and our white students.
I was kind of surprised. This is the one where just across the board, it was universally, the trend was down, and I'm just curious.
So we need to talk with those schools that offer those possibilities to our students and really understand what differently and differentially is happening with students. And in preparing this presentation, I did not have the opportunity to do that, but Ms. Calvert might have some additional insight.
I think one of the things that has impacted dual credit courses in particular, there's dual college credit courses, I think, or is it IB that was the question? IB. Was it about IB or dual credit?
It was about a dual credit because
Okay.
it looks like universally
Yeah.
in all categories, there
Yep.
was the trend line is.
Right. So there are 2 things that I think are represented in here. One, there are dual credit classes that are offered on high school campuses, right, by PPS instructors. There's also college credit courses that are offered at community colleges or with PSU that are on PSU's campuses. One of the things just to note is that PCC did not come back into person at the same rate we did. So there are some schools that have strong partnerships with PCC that those classes still were online last year that were impacting this senior class. So some students chose to stay in, once we got back into in-person learning, wanted it to be in person and did not want to take college level courses online. So that's some of what we're seeing.
Now we'll turn our attention to IB pass rates. Those course completion, successful completion of 3 or more courses remain low for our native Black and Pacific Islander students, where fewer than 5% of the students were meeting that post-secondary readiness standard in this area. Overall, the rate did increase, likely credited to increases among our white students, our Asian students, and our multiracial students who are not underserved.
Just a question about that. So at both of the IB schools, Cleveland and Lincoln, when we went and did, we had a meeting, like for example in Cleveland, and I know that Lincoln had followed in this track, that they did IB for all, which is all, say juniors would take IB English, and I thought they were also going to take IB math. Is my understanding that was what they were doing at Cleveland, and then Lincoln the same thing. So it wasn't like, hey, you have this group of kids who are, heading off into the IB track and everybody else is in the regular track, but really everybody's gonna, for an IB school, everybody's gonna take these 2 classes. Is that still happening? And is that having any sort of impact on these numbers? Because it seems like the numbers would be much higher if everybody's taking it, and I mean, unless everybody's getting D's or.
So, again, this measure is a measure of taking 3 IB classes, right? So it's not just a singular class or the success rate in each of the classes. So Cleveland has done some concerted efforts to do junior language arts or ELA as IB for all their students. It is their junior English class. So that is 1 class, and then there should be 2 more that would be needed in order to get to this standard for 3. We're seeing similar things and efforts at in AP courses. So there are a couple schools like McDaniel is offering AP Human Geography for all sophomores as an example. So we're starting to see that there are entry point classes that schools are trying to make sure that becomes a common experience for all students that then would encourage them to take additional advanced courses in IB, AP, or dual credit. So Jefferson, for example, has dual credit, junior English is dual credit for all students at Jefferson, for example. So we're seeing this as an entry point in a way to provide common experiences at multiple schools. And it's in all 3 areas, whether it's AP, IB, or dual credit.
It'd be super cool if the graduation rate was the same as the 3 APs, if you just had everybody's taking 3 AP classes because it's AP for all in certain subjects, and that they actually mirror the same.
And I think it's similar for the CTE pathways, right? So like, depending on what we're looking at, the goal is to see this experience being getting closer to matching our graduation rates overall, right? And CTE is probably the closest, yeah.
Okay, let me make sure I know where I am. Sorry. New for this reporting cycle, and especially for Director Green to make it a little bit longer. We took a look at students' performance on college entrance exams as a measure of post-secondary readiness. Each of these exams has a threshold with their subtests in ELA and mathematics, and the score indicates post-secondary readiness and usually the likelihood that you'll successfully, complete your first year of college with certain GPA. Here has been the trend with most PPS assessment data. The performance varies along the lines of race, with our Black students showing the lowest achievement, Gesundheit, and levels among all of the students. And so if we are to think about this, this shows that there is still work to be done around achievement, right? Even when we think about things like IB and AP for all, it's critical that when you're implementing something like that we have all the necessary supports and structures in place to support students who under other circumstances might not have had the opportunity or been counseled into an AP or an IB course, and now are giving that opportunity moving forward. Let's wrap up with the seal of biliteracy. We know this is an asset in today's global economy, and we just had a lot of testimony tonight about biliteracy from our students, which was so great. I love to see that advocacy. Nearly 21% of all PPS students in the class of 2022 attained the seal of biliteracy, which is down a little bit from the prior year. You will note that, again, there's mixed performance among students with large student groups with large swings in attainment. For example, fewer than 5 students who are Black, Native, or Pacific Islander attain the seal, while 46% of multiracial students who are not underserved attain the seal. And so in conclusion, 3 takeaways. Our 4-year cohort graduation rate continues to improve and increase over time, as does our 5th-year completion rate. So that's good news in the aggregate. There are still some persistent gaps in graduation rate by race, with some student groups showing signs of progress. Very proud and happy to be able to talk about the African American graduation rate being up almost 4 percentage points. And overall, post-secondary readiness rates declined between the class of 21 and the class of 22, and we still see those persistent gaps and differences here along the lines of race. And with that, we'll take any remaining questions that the body may have.
Thank you for the presentation.
I waited, and I'm proud of myself for that.
And you remembered your question?
And I did. I wrote them down.
Then I didn't do my job.
I wrote them down. This is why I love my guy. So you mentioned a couple of things towards the end that really caught my attention and made the questions that I was going to have stand out. You mentioned that we want to make sure that they finish the first year with like specific GPAs, which led me to the first question that I have is, do we have or can we get data on the first year of college completion rates? Because it's one thing to leave the high school. It's another thing to actually finish the first year. So when I think readiness, I'm thinking that you actually finished. And so I'm looking if we can look at that being one thing. The next thing that you mentioned is, and again, that was in your last line there, you mentioned supports, having available supports, which led me to a question that I was starting to form, couldn't get all the way out, but can we list, or in the schools that we know are doing well, when we look at those schools, what are the supports that they actually have in place that are actually aiding and abetting the students that are doing well above the C, right? I mean, I know we say C's get degrees, but I don't want the person with a C working on me. I don't want that person like on my heart. I don't want him in my lungs. I don't want him anywhere near me. I want the one that got the A, really, and then if I have to get somebody else, give me the person that did the B. But the person that got C was playing beer pong the whole time. I don't want him near me. And so what do we have that shows the supports that are in those schools working really well so that those kids are achieving high scores? And then can we name those supports? And if we can name those supports, then what can we do to make sure that those specific supports are in every school, especially the Roosevelts and the Ida B. Wells and the Jeffersons?
Sure, I can start and maybe Ms. Calvert can jump in. Part of our work with principals and their continuous improvement plans is bringing them together to analyze data and to have dialogue with each other about practices that they're using in their buildings that are meeting with success, or some that may be not meeting with success. So we know, just as teachers learn really best from other teachers often, our principals learn best from dialoguing and spending time with one another. And there's opportunity under Dr. Franco, Dr. Proctor's, and the assistant superintendent's leadership at the monthly principals leadership development. There's opportunities each month for just high school principals to be together to talk about the successes and challenges in their building and to share best practices and lessons learned.
And in terms of looking at early indicators for success, for example, starting with 9th grade, we do have an emphasis on 9th grade success with our high school success teams that are working with students. They're continue to look at on-track and off-track indicators by quarter by examining student grades so that we can provide early intervention and support for the students to improve where there are lagging results in their grades, for example. So we do have an effort back to your question of what data do we look at after the first year, for example, to see how it is that we are supporting students. And I'll ask Ms. Calvert to speak to the specific supports.
So I have a new favorite phrase, which is aiding and abetting student success. So this is a good. I'm taking that like guilty as charged, right? So this is one of the pieces, and I want to highlight and emphasize what Dr. Adams and Dr. Proctor mentioned. One is that we're looking closely at school improvement planning, and people are developing theories of action that are saying, if we do this and take these steps, we expect student outcomes to be different. So every high school, actually every school in the district, is doing that process. And what we're looking at is where are the spaces and places that we're finding success that, as you're describing, we can take to scale. So one is to look at the data. One is actually, before we do that, one is to say, these are the actions that we're going to take, and sort of putting that stake in the ground that this is what we're going to do, and we're hoping to see this result, and we're expecting to see that result. And then when we do that, we're going to say, how does that carry out across the system? So some of the things that we are seeing have been successful, and I want to just absolutely share that Tier 1 instruction, really strong Tier 1 instruction, is critical to the success of all students, and it's critical to the success of students in every school. With that said, then we go to Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. But we're really, this year, the focus has been on really developing strong Tier 1 instruction in every classroom across every high school in the system. So that we're doing things like doing instructional rounds, where we're walking through with colleagues and principals and looking at instruction and thinking about what's the next professional learning that needs to happen to support students. We're seeing that. We just completed some instructional walks across the system, looking with some central office folks about how we're seeing and talking about instruction. So that's one sort of bucket of work. I think the second is, once we see what are our indicators of what when students need additional support, and what is that going to look like. So what we're seeing across some schools is that they're doing intentional support. So like if we're providing, to your point, AP for all, what is this? How are we providing additional support so it's not just access, but we get to success? And so where are we seeing those investments, and then building those strategies out? One of the big keys that we're also seeing, and we saw this coming back from the pandemic, is around attendance. And sort of the good news is that students figured out how to access curriculum online. The bad news is they figured out how to access curriculum online. And so we need to get them back in the school and the classrooms, and so that we can provide those real-time supports. So I think those are some of the strategies, but the mechanisms to kind of share that learning is through our instructional rounds, our school improvement planning processes, and the work that is in collaboration where we're seeing it in real time, and then trying to build generalizations from the data as we go.
And to get back to your first question around how students actually perform in college, we can look into having a partnership with the National Student Clearinghouse, because they typically have those data. In the previous district, we had that information, and it was useful, so I'll have my team, I'll work with Dr. Proctor to look into that and what that would take.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't we have access through, maybe it used to be through ACT, but you could look at, for example, the Oregon colleges of, say, freshman students to see how they did, like, who came out of PPS, how they did in their freshman classes. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's a, it used to be called the National Student Loan Clearinghouse. But they changed the name slightly, and so because students have to fill out that federal application for student aid, they're able to link that typically to where and which high schools students went to, and then link that to the colleges that they attend. So I think the National Student Clearinghouse data would encompass more schools than just the schools in the state, and I think it would be more comprehensive, so we'll look into that.
Right, because you see what I'm looking at is like, who finished and who didn't. Because if you were ready, you should be able to finish. And if you didn't, then how do we get you ready? And so that's what so thank you for that. That's
Sure.
exactly
How
what I'm
close are you?
thinking. Yeah, well, that's all I meant.
Student Representative McMahon.
Yeah, I don't know. So looking at this data, was this like pretty consistent trends like across each school? And I don't know necessarily if we had the data from every individual school, but was this like, yeah, students from Cleveland, you know, what is it, like 20% of them graduated or like completed 3 IB classes with a C or above. But then like at another school that was way higher. Or was it like these trends are pretty consistent at every school? That's the amount of students that are completing with a C or higher.
Well, I think our trends are pretty different at most of our schools, right? If they were more similar, I would hope we would be at a position where we'd have higher percentages. But we know we have differential performance. Ms. Calvert talked a lot about supports for Roosevelt and their student body and that changing. So we also tried to provide, at the request of the board, school level data, but when you drill down that low, the data then have to be suppressed because they're publicly available once we provide them to the board members, so it's not really usable. But we can certainly work with Dr. Franco to think about how can we leverage looking at these data at an individual school level by principals, because they can do it via the dashboard.
Director Hollins?
Quick question. You talked about Tier 1 instruction. Can you dive in further what that means?
So Tier 1 instruction is instruction that all students receive by design of the instructional program. So at the high school level, English 1 is a course that, or English 1-2 is what we call it here in Portland, is the course that at its very core is Tier 1. It's the instruction that is given to all students. Tier 2 then looks at the students that may indicate a need for support or intervention. Then when you add an additional layer of instruction or an intervention, it moves to a Tier 2. And then further still, of those students, there will be even a smaller population of students that demonstrate more intensive support, a need of more intensive support. Then in addition to the Tier 1 instruction that they receive, they also receive what we call a Tier 2. So if you think about it in terms of an elementary school, you know, Ms. Proctor teaches 3rd grade. I have curriculum resources that I provide for all of my students in the 3rd grade. That's the Tier 1. But I have a group of 6 students that I notice in reviewing their assessments that they're struggling. So I'll pull those 6 students into a small group and do a reteach of the curriculum. That's Tier 2. But of the 6 students, I have just 1 that really is still not getting it with the closer touch, as I like to call it, with the teacher in small group. So that means I need to do a one-on-one with that student. So everyone gets Tier 1, some get Tier 2, and a smaller group still, usually it's 1 or 2, maybe 3 students that would demonstrate a requirement for Tier 3. If everyone in my class is struggling, then I need to reteach to everyone and go back to Tier 1.
And do all that happen within that course of the year?
It should be, yes.
I think one of the, Dr. Proctor alluded to this, one of the critical components of Tier 1 instruction is that it includes rich and robust differentiation for students at different levels of instruction, right? Just because I'm reading a little bit behind Ms. Calvert doesn't mean I necessarily need Tier 2. It can get to a point where my reading is so far behind that I need Tier 2 or Tier 3, but I don't want anyone to have the assumption that Tier 1 means that everybody's academically at the exact same place with the skills that they come with, right? You have to differentiate within the first tier and provide supports and scaffolds for all of the students, and then you find out for whom those things don't work, and then you move those students into Tier 2 while still making sure they have access to Tier 1 instruction, because we know if we pull students away from tier 1 and only give them tier 2 or tier 3, they fall behind.
Right, everyone gets tier 1 all the time. And then, yes, thank you for adding that layer. There is differentiation within tier 1.
Director Edwards?
Can I just follow on that?
I just want to say an appreciation for your obvious experience in the classrooms. It's really showing through.
I'm just wondering at what tier the tutoring is. So is that 3? I mean, when you're adding that on, because there's been a lot of discussion about, hey, catching students up after COVID. For some students, that's going to be, in addition to tier 1 and tier 2, is tier 3 the tutoring, or is that tier 1, 2, and 3, and then there's this separate activity?
Yeah, so that's really a good question. When it comes to tier 2 and 3, that's when we take students, or we have back in the day we called it a collaborative problem solving. Now it's MTSS, where educators come together to have conversations about how students are doing and what supports they need. So for example, taking that same example and leveling up to a middle school, a middle school student has 7 or so teachers, we may realize that Jackie is struggling, and I may have an approach that works in my English class, but Mr. Green is struggling to teach Jackie and get Jackie to really be successful in a math class. We have conversation about what interventions and supports can happen. We have our learning acceleration, yes, that happens, but those are supplemental programs above and beyond what we do within MTSS to identify where students may need additional intervention above tier 1 with that differentiation.
So one of the pieces that is unique about high schools is, and I would say is that, and we've heard some conversation around flex time, right? So it's within the school day, right? This is a time where students, it's within the school day, and then the students and teachers can say, okay, hey, come, let's do some of that small group instruction or do the follow-up in pieces. So that would be like an example of tier 2, is that it falls within the school day, it's targeted, and it's part of why we use flex time at the high schools, is to give students, they're managing many classes, right? So here's an opportunity and access to specific teachers at a specific time for additional support.
Okay, I want to wrap us up and move forward. I don't want to lose sight of the good news here, and going back to graduation rates, and it's just to see that jump over the years from 72 to over 90% is really extraordinary. And so thank you for that. And I also want to just call out the clarity that we have when it comes to some of the racial disparities. I mean, you note on this slide very specifically that there are still persistent gaps in graduation rate by race, and you note on this slide that there are still persistent gaps and differences along the lines of race prevalent across our post-secondary readiness measures. That's not good news. That's bad news. But we can only solve that problem if we're clear about it. And I think one of the things that has just been really interesting to me, being on the board for the last 4 years, is the increasing clarity with which we're saying that. And I remember it was a year and a half ago that the Oregonian, sort of ran these stories about these racial disparities, and they sort of pretended like they, had found them. It was investigative reporting. And of course, they were using data that the superintendent and his team had put out there. And, we've been talking about these since I've been on the board, probably before that. And the Oregonian could have been writing about racial disparities and systemic racism for 100 years. So there are some negative downsides, but the reality is we only solve the problem if we are clear about what it is. And so I just want to appreciate what you and your team have done to say, it's a problem and it's there, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to pretend that it's better than it is. This is how I think we're going to actually address it and solve it. So I appreciate that clarity.
I just want to bring full circle what you're saying, that add the context that this presentation is responding to our board goals, which are set with that lens, to not just look at our overall achievement at high school, but look at our disparities. Sorry.
Just 2 final comments. I appreciate it because the observations are are the right ones. First of all, and I know we mentioned this in the recent press announcements, but just kudos to our hardworking students, educators, school and district leaders for yet another year of incremental growth. We're pleased about that, and we do have work to do because you do see the variability across student groups and schools, but when you have the building blocks now in place that haven't always been there, combined with, curriculum coming aboard, the aligned training and continued data literacy and continuous improvement, we can start to point to those promising practices and we can start to replicate those across schools. So, just a little bit of commendation there for our educators. And then the second thing I wanted to share, because it got me thinking, the questions earlier around, we want a reference point or a comparator, and Dr. Adams was right. We don't necessarily have universal indicators. We'd have to do a little digging, but the Council of Great City Schools actually does this work. So their last report came out this past October 2022. You can find it published on the website, and it actually takes all the council districts. But the indicators vary a little bit. It'll talk about, AP exams at 3 or higher. It'll talk about course number of enrollment. It also adds in attendance and discipline. So, I would point directors to spend a minute kind of looking through those. You'll notice that Portland's called out in a few areas for overall performance, but also in remarkable progress in some areas. So I think the council does a good job of a deep dive there. Director Constam's always reminding us to get our homework in each fall because we want to be part of that annual publishing. I know Dr. Adams just got the request for all of our academic KPIs, and we're also submitting all of our business KPIs too. So the next report should have a well-rounded viewpoint on how we're doing compared to the other 77 peers across the country.
It's only going to get better. Class of 2023, I've got a good feeling.
Yeah, I'm just excited that my own kid will contribute, I hope, fingers crossed, to the graduation rate this year.
Yes, Parker.
Right?
Do your part.
I know, right? Great. Thank you very much for the information and discussion. Appreciate it. Okay, next up and last up, I think on our agenda, are board operating protocols. You're going to get hard copy. See, this was a prelude when I said hard copy. You'll get this electronically as well. So I'll take everyone back. I'm sure you all remember in the fall, we had a board retreat. We discussed some revisions to the board protocols. There was a lot of good discussion around that. We have begun to implement soft implementation of pieces of this, mostly around the timeline. So you've been getting emails from Roseanne. We've obviously moved to once a month board meetings with a work session in between. We're moving towards the board materials being available 12 days in advance with a time period for questions. That's all captured in here. There was a lot that we talked about at that retreat, and as you recall, there was consensus on some things, and there were different opinions on others. I'll send this around electronically. This was a version control issue. That's why you got a hard copy today. But we'll send this around. What I would encourage board members, and we'll post this as well, the plan is to hopefully vote on this at our next board meeting, which is March 7th, so we've got about a month. Obviously, if there's more need for discussion by the board, I want to facilitate that. So if you have a chance to go through and you feel like, there's still some stuff you really want to have, discussion on, we do have a work session in 2 weeks, and I think we could add this on if we need to. On the other hand, if we go through and we say, yeah, this kind of reflects what we had as a conversation, and we think we're good, then we can do that as well. But just as a reminder, this kind of tries to capture everything in terms of roles and responsibilities and, how we set priorities. Again, it gives some of the meeting timelines in here. Expectation of board members, how we communicate, how we ask for information, et cetera, committee protocols, and so forth. So with that, obviously, if there are any questions today, happy to answer those. And I guess one more thing that I will just ask is what board members would like in terms of facilitating this. I will say that my hope was to do a red line of our existing protocols to these. The only thing I will tell you is that they're so different, a red line becomes kind of meaningless. So, it's just red lines all over the place. I'm happy Roseanne can send around the existing protocols, right? So the folks have that and this new version. But is there anything else that board members would facilitate this conversation over the next few weeks and hopefully moving towards a vote this relatively soon? Director Remembrance.
Yeah, I had I have a couple thoughts. Obviously, I just got the revised version, and we had that discussion, was it 4 months ago? Or, I mean, it was a while ago, so I want to go back and look at my notes. One thing I think I want to, just given where we are in the year and knowing that, you know, every 2 years we have essentially a new board, is that we put some sort of end date on it, so that there's a, so that when, you know, one of the things that happens, you get a new group of board members come in, and you know, some board members are drinking from a fire hose, others are taking a break during the summer, but then you get into the start of school and you're off and running, is that to put some sort of like end date on it, so that there's a requirement that the board actually deliberately and intentionally looks at it and has a discussion about it, versus just rolling into the following year. That would be sort of one comment. And I guess I'll just, this is a just larger overarching comment, is that it's super detailed. And I think one of the things to think about, and prescriptive, is, you know, where's their flex and grace? Because there's going to be instances where staff or board members, because this is really an agreement in some ways between staff and board members, like where's the flex and the grace, and where's the sort of consistency of how it gets applied. So that's like one thing that I want to think about as I look back through here, because as soon as you get super detailed, then it's like, okay, is everybody going to be held to every word? Or and likewise, staff and board members, or is it, you know, more a set of guidelines, and you know, how that works? And I think that's a good conversation to have, so it's not when you have that and it's super detailed, and the first time that something happens and we say we're not going to do X, or we're going to do Y about it, and if we've let other things slide, it then becomes like it's a perception that it's unevenly applied. And so, like, how do we infuse some grace into the document? I mean, I've just been around long enough to know that, like, that just happens. And you know, how then also do we start talking to board members who, as I say if we have new board members in July, you know, sort of bringing them into the ways of working, and making it, you know, and I also think, you know, it's always good with a new board, or to look back, like what's working, what's not, and how do we adjust. So those would just be some high-level thoughts I had, that, again, without looking at any of the details.
Sure, thanks. One of the questions, just before, sorry, Byrony, on the end date, because I see your point, right? You do have a new board. Is there also an argument, though, again, when we talk about consistency, the board at any time, a majority of the board, can change the protocols, whether there's an end date or not. And I wonder if is there the alternate side of that? Is there value in having, again, just a regular standard practice for the PPS board that doesn't change just because you add 1 or 2 members, but only changes if there really is a majority that says, you know, we want something to change. I was struck tonight, you know, these are protocols we're putting on ourselves, and so we can always take them off. As I was going through the script around the consent agenda, you know, we've sort of moved towards this, you know, you have a period of time, any member can object to something, a consent agenda, and have it pulled. If you miss that window, you know, AJ's protocols that he gave us are very, like, if you miss that window, it you know, it does not come off unless the board votes a majority, and then it cannot be heard at that meeting, it has to be heard at the next meeting. And I thought to myself, well, unless a majority of the board decides to suspend the protocols for that meeting, in which case then they can hear it. And it just got me thinking about governance generally. 4 members of this board can do almost anything when it comes to our own governance. And so I guess I think your point is a really good one about, you know, do we want to make sure we're bringing new board members in? Is there also an alternate side of that coin, that consistency is important? Unless 4 members.
I agree with
There's
that.
different ways to do it. You could, like, also have a, like, reaffirmation, and I always think it's good to look at like, hey, what,
As part of our board evaluation.
yeah, just say, what works, what doesn't, where do we want to have more flex? Like, in general, this whole process of having one board meeting and get the materials way in advance, I think, I feel a sense of relief. It's like, I don't have to, spend, the Thursday night, because if I want to get something in by Friday, there's more time period, hopefully staff has more time period. So I think there's a lot of value. I also think it's a totally different way that things have been done for 6 or 7 years. And so it's just good to have, I think, a conversation about like on a regular basis versus just, letting things slide. Cause it's sort of like, hey, somebody, we're supposed to get everything by 12 o'clock. And I think AJ's original proposal of like, if it's not in 5, it's just not in. If we get something like 11 days in advance, I'm still like, we should, like have some flex. It's like, that seems reasonable as long as we get.
Well, and I really liked your view at the retreat that, viewing this as a pilot and let's see how it works and reevaluate and go from there. So it was great. Barry.
Yeah, I remember when both like at the actual retreat, but also when we saw these board protocols for the first time. And I don't necessarily think it's something that needs to be addressed in terms of this, because there's 7 of you and 1 of me. But the issue is that this is made for you guys, and both in terms of like our general role, since I have symbolic vote, as well as like our actual legal roles. And I was in communication with the Oregon Government like Ethics Committee and talking to them about, well, if I'm not a publicly elected official, but I sit on the board, and in many ways, I'm like have a similar role, what does that look like? And so I guess if not to change these protocols, obviously it would require, having to decide like, okay, what do we functionally see the student rep doing? What should apply to them and what shouldn't? But I guess if after we pass these, maybe that could be explained, because I also think obviously the student reps since we change every year, we also don't necessarily have the stability to kind of go through the process, see what works for us and what doesn't, or to even understand these protocols. And so I think that either making space to, as a board, change some of these protocols so that the role of the student representative is more clear as to what applies to them, or if just taking the time to establish that as a group, maybe not changing the protocols specifically, but changing like the board policy, or just creating some sort of way that students can understand. Certainly I'm thinking about, as I move into electing the next student representative, what rules does that person have to follow, and how can we make that transition easiest for them?
Thank you. And I did go back through your comments at that retreat, and I think it's a good conversation to keep having. I mean, this is, on the one hand, you're as much of an equal on this board as we can be, but you're right, there are certain things here that don't apply.
I mean, it's also very tricky, because this should apply. Obviously, there's more of you than there is of me, and also the role changes differently, certainly depending on the person too. Like I'm a very different student rep than Jackson was, and Jackson was different than the student rep before them. So it just is a difficult thing to balance, and I appreciate you going back and looking at those things, but just to bring it up again as we consider it.
Appreciate it. Other thoughts or comments tonight? Okay.
No, I appreciated your point about the importance of endorsing these protocols and them not seeming like a very moment in time expression from a certain constellation of a board. It's really an expression of best practices and what we believe, and certainly any different group of people can, have a conversation about going back and modifying it, but I wouldn't support having an end date. I think what we want to communicate is that this is what we aspire to. These are best practices. We're making this agreement, and not that it's sort of transient.
Great. Okay, so I would encourage you, take a look through, shoot any questions that you have towards me or Roseanne. We'll try and answer them. And again, as you go through this, and we'll try and loop back to the board to ask again, probably in a week or so. If you feel like there's a need for a board discussion, we'll try and make sure that happens before the March 7th meeting. With that, I have one more thing that's not on the agenda. It's not even really a board issue. I mean, it's a board issue, but not a board meeting. But General Counsel at Large, there's a new requirement on board members as of January, and I believe we might have gotten an email about this, right? And we need to be following up. I just want to make sure the board could you remind us what we need to be doing? Because I'm realizing I saw that email and then it got lost in the hundreds of other emails we got this.
All right, so it's a requirement passed by statute that extends the SEI, Statement of Economic Interest, to school board members. It's been applicable to a lot of other elected and public servants, other public servants. You need to register, as I recall, by March 15 to set up your account with the OGEC, and that's instructions in the email you received. And you have to file the actual economic statement by April 15. There are several OSBA tutorial sessions on how to do that. MESD has a key role in supporting, and obviously we will help support, and Roseanne has been on the front lines of this already, so let me speak on your behalf, Roseanne. Of helping to get information and set up the account. You're individually responsible for filing the economic statements, but we want to support you getting it set up and having all the information you need to accurately do that.
Great. That would be helpful the deadlines are helpful. We're reminding people that we got an email because, again, amidst the hundreds of emails we've got over the last month, it's hard to find those.
I think there aren't instructions in the email that we have received before. It says we will receive an email directly from them that will prompt us to the forms that we need to respond to.
Okay.
Maybe we can recirculate that, Roseanne? Oh, you just did.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other business for tonight? All right, so the next regular meeting of the board will be held on March 7th at McDaniel High School. And again, we have a work session in 2 weeks on safety and security as well, and committee meetings in the meantime. This meeting's adjourned.